judge stunned by the legal brilliance of this 8-year-old boy. The heavy silence of the Boston District Court was broken by a child's voice, small but firm, echoing off the wood-paneled walls. Ethan Parker, just 8 years old, adjusted his slightly oversized navy blazer and lifted his chin with a determination that defied his age. "Your Honor, with all due respect, you're misinterpreting Article 186 of the Civil Code," the boy said, his clear voice cutting through the tense air of the courtroom. Judge William Harrison, a 15-year veteran known for his strictness, paused mid-sentence. His eyes widened behind his glasses as he looked down at Ethan, who stood beside his mother, Sarah Parker, a 42-year-old woman who had cleaned the courthouse offices for over a decade. "What did you say, young man?" the judge asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and irritation. Ethan didn't back down. Instead, he stepped forward, his small hands clutching a worn notebook filled with neatly written notes. "Your Honor, you're ruling that my mother was negligent for not reviewing the rental contract, but Article 186 states that an unlawful act is one that, through action or voluntary omission, negligence or recklessness, violates a right and causes harm to another. The landlord was the one who omitted essential information about necessary property repairs. The fault can't fall on my mother." Attorney Richard Morgan, the lawyer representing the landlord from Prestige Realty Group, let out a sarcastic laugh. From his desk, "Your Honor, this is absurd. A child can't interfere in a legal proceeding. I request he be removed from the courtroom immediately." Judge Harrison raised his hand for silence. There was something about the boy's seriousness that intrigued him. In his 15-year career, he'd never seen anything like this. "Son, how do you know about this?" he asked, his tone now more curious than annoyed. Ethan opened his notebook and began reciting from memory. Beyond Article 186, there's Article 422, which addresses good faith in contracts. The landlord violated the principle of disclosure by failing to reveal that the apartment needed structural repairs. There's also a violation of Article 51, Section 4 of the Consumer Protection Act, which deems abusive any clauses that impose unjust obligations. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah looked at her son with a mix of pride and worry. She knew Ethan wasn't like other kids, always reading and asking questions she couldn't answer, but she never imagined he'd go this far. "Attorney." Morgan stood up, visibly agitated. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. Clearly someone coached this child to say these things. This is manipulation of the legal process." "No one taught me," Ethan replied firmly. "I read the books my mum uses to clean the lawyer's offices. When she works nights, I stay with her and read." Judge Harrison leaned back in his chair, completely stunned. In all his years on the bench, he'd never encountered anything like this. An 8-year-old citing legal articles with precision and making coherent legal arguments. "Sarah," he said, turning to the mother, "did you teach your son these things?" Sarah shook her head nervously. "No, Your Honor. I barely finished middle school. Ethan's always been like this, ever since he was little. He teaches himself. When he started reading at 4, I thought it was normal, but then I realized he was different." Ethan continued speaking as if giving a lecture. "The contract my mother signed is predatory, Your Honor. There's a clear imbalance between the contracting parties. The landlord, represented by Prestige Realty Group, deliberately withheld information about the property's condition. When my mother found out she needed to spend $3,000 on basic repairs just to make the apartment livable, she had already paid the security deposit and first month's rent." Attorney Morgan slammed his hand on the table. "This is a rehearsed act. No child talks like this." Judge Harrison raised his hand again, signaling the attorney to be silent. He was genuinely fascinated and disturbed at the same time. "Ethan, can you explain to me what you understand by an unconscionable contract?" The boy didn't hesitate. "An unconscionable contract is one where one party gains excessive advantage over the other, resulting in harm or a state of peril. In my mother's case, she was in dire need of housing because we had been evicted from our previous apartment. The Realty Group took advantage of that vulnerability to impose abusive conditions." Sarah held her son's hand, her eyes welling up. She remembered the desperation she felt 3 months ago when they were evicted from their old apartment. Ethan had missed 2 weeks of school because they had nowhere to live, sleeping at a different relative's house each night. And how do you suggest I proceed? Asked the judge, genuinely curious to hear the answer. Ethan quickly flipped through his notebook. The contract should be voided based on the doctrine of unforeseen circumstances and defects in consent. My mother didn't have access to complete information at the time of signing. Furthermore, there should be reimbursement for the amounts already paid and for the distress caused. Article 157 of the Civil Code provides for the annulment of legal agreements in cases of harm. Attorney Morgan was visibly nervous now. What had seemed like a straightforward case was getting complicated due to the boy's precise interventions. Your Honor, I request a recess. I need to consult my clients about these allegations. Judge Harrison looked at Ethan for a long moment. There was something in the child's gaze that moved him deeply. It wasn't just intelligence. There was a seriousness, a determination he rarely saw even in seasoned attorneys. Recess granted. We'll resume in 1 hour, he announced, banging the gavel. As the room began to empty, the judge called Sarah and Ethan over. Mrs. Parker, may I speak with you both in my chambers? In his office, surrounded by shelves filled with law books, Judge Harrison watched Ethan with growing fascination. The boy sat on the edge of the chair, his feet not reaching the floor, yet his posture was that of someone much older. Ethan, where did you learn all this? Asked the judge. I read while my mother works, the boy replied simply. She cleans Attorney Stewart's office at night and I stay with her. He has a lot of law books. At first I just looked at the pictures, but then I started reading for real. Sarah interjected, Judge, Ethan has always been like this. When he was a baby, he'd spend hours looking at the books I had at home. By 3, he was reading simple words. By 5, he was reading entire newspapers. I don't know where it comes from. And at school, how does he do? Asked the judge. Sarah's face grew sad. That's the problem, Judge. The teachers say he's arrogant, that he acts like he knows more than they do. We've changed schools 3 times. They don't know what to do with him. Ethan lowered his head. I just want to learn, sir, but when I know the answers and raise my hand, they get mad at me. They say I'm disrupting the class. Judge Harrison felt a tightness in his chest. This child clearly had an extraordinary gift, yet he was being misunderstood, even punished for it. Ethan, how old are you again? 8, sir. I'll be 9 in December. And do you really understand everything you're saying, or are you just repeating what you've read? Ethan looked directly into the judge's eyes. I understand, Uncle. For example, when Attorney Morgan said my mother's contract was valid because she signed it willingly, he was wrong. Free will doesn't exist when you have no real choice. My mother was desperate. We needed a place to live. That's called a state of necessity, and the law protects people in that situation. Judge Harrison fell silent for a moment, processing what he had just heard. It wasn't just the child's technical knowledge that impressed him, but his ability to apply the law to the real situation in a logical and humane way. Sarah, do you have any relatives who are lawyers? Someone who might have influenced the boy? No, Your Honor, my whole family are working-class people. My father was a construction worker, my mother a housekeeper. I have a sister who works in a factory and a brother who's a mechanic. No one studied law. A knock at the door interrupted the conversation. It was the judge's secretary. Judge Harrison, Attorney Morgan is here and would like to speak with you. Send him in. Attorney. Morgan entered the office with a serious expression. He was a man in his 50s with graying hair, an expensive suit, and a demeanor that showed years of courtroom experience. Your Honor, I need to discuss this situation. My clients are concerned about the direction this case is taking. And what exactly is their concern? The judge asked. Well, it's obvious someone coached this child on what to say. That constitutes bad faith in litigation. I request an investigation to uncover who's behind it. Ethan stood up from his chair, visibly upset. No one taught me anything. I learned it on my own. Attorney Morgan ignored the boy and continued addressing the judge. Your Honor, children don't recite legal articles from memory. Someone is using this situation to manipulate the proceedings in favor of the plaintiff. Judge Harrison observed the genuine indignation on Ethan's face and made a decision that would surprise everyone. Attorney Morgan, I'll conduct a test. If Ethan truly has this knowledge, he should be able to answer questions about other legal topics, not just this specific case. What kind of test? the attorney asked skeptically. I'll ask random questions about different areas of law. If he's just repeating memorized lines, he won't be able to answer. Ethan nodded firmly. Ask away, Uncle. The judge thought for a moment, then asked, Ethan, can you explain the difference between intent and negligence in criminal law? The boy didn't hesitate. Intent is when someone wants the result or takes the risk of causing it. Negligence is when someone doesn't want the result, but acts carelessly, recklessly, or with incompetence, and ends up causing it anyway. For example, if someone pushes another person down the stairs intending to hurt them, that's intent. If someone accidentally knocks them down because they weren't paying attention, that's negligence. Attorney Morgan was starting to look uncomfortable. The judge continued. And in constitutional law, can you tell me about fundamental rights? Of course, Ethan replied. Fundamental rights are in Article 5 of the Constitution and include things like the right to life, liberty, equality, safety, and property. But there are other rights too, like the social rights in Article 6, which include education, healthcare, work, and housing. What about labor law? The Labor Code regulates employment relationships. Every worker has the right to a minimum wage, an 8-hour workday, paid vacation, a 13th salary, and a 401k plan. If someone is fired without just cause, they're entitled to notice and unemployment benefits. Attorney Morgan was clearly unsettled now. The child's answers were far too precise and spontaneous to be rehearsed. Judge Harrison asked a few more questions about different legal areas, and Ethan answered each one with the same ease and accuracy. Family law, corporate law, administrative law. The child showed surprising knowledge in all areas. Impressive, murmured the judge. Ethan, how do you remember all this? I don't know, Uncle. I read and it stays in my head. It's like the information organizes itself in there. When I need it, it just comes to me. Attorney Morgan made one last attempt. Even if the child has this knowledge, he can't interfere in the proceedings. He lacks legal standing. Ethan interrupted him. I'm not interfering as a party to the case. I'm helping my mom because she's not a lawyer and can't afford to hire a good one. Article 133 of the Constitution says an attorney is essential to the administration of justice. But that doesn't mean a person can't defend themselves or get help from family. Judge Harrison grew more impressed but also concerned. This child clearly had extraordinary talent, but his situation was delicate. Sarah, may I ask about your financial situation? Sarah sighed sadly. Your Honor, I make 1.5 minimum wages cleaning offices. My mother, Grandma Rose, helps by watching Ethan when I work nights, but she only has her Social Security. We get by, but it's always tight. And Ethan's father, Sarah's face closed off. He left when Ethan was 2. Said he didn't want to raise a weird kid, never came back. Ethan lowered his head at this. It was a topic that always deeply saddened him. Attorney Morgan, seeing an opportunity, struck. That explains it. The child is being used by his mother for financial gain. This is a classic case of child exploitation. Sarah stood up, furious. How dare you say such a thing? I would never use my son for anything. Ethan also stood, his eyes blazing with anger. My mum never asked me to say anything. I came here because I saw her crying when she read the ruling you wanted the judge to give. She worked so hard and you wanted her to lose the money she already paid and still be forced to pay a fine. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. Judge Harrison watched the argument closely. There was something in the genuine outrage of mother and son that convinced him Attorney Morgan was wrong in his accusations. Enough, said the judge, raising his hand. Attorney Morgan, your insinuations are inappropriate. It's clear this child isn't being manipulated. His outrage is genuine, as is his knowledge. But, Your Honor, no buts. We'll resume the hearing in 15 minutes. And Attorney Morgan, I suggest you rethink your strategy because the arguments young Ethan has presented are consistent and relevant to the case. When they returned to the courtroom, the atmosphere had changed. News of the prodigy boy had spread quickly through the courthouse halls, and a crowd had gathered to watch the hearing continue. Ethan stood by his mother again. adjusting the second-hand blue blazer Sarah had bought specially for the occasion. He knew this moment was important, not just for their case, but to prove he deserved to be taken seriously. Attorney Morgan tried to regain control. Your Honor, regardless of the peculiarities of the situation, the fact remains that my client, Prestige Realty Group, fulfilled all legal terms of the contract. Mrs. Sarah signed the document after, reading all clauses. Ethan couldn't hold back. But you're forgetting about the information asymmetry. Your client failed to disclose that the apartment had plumbing issues, ceiling leaks, and faulty electrical wiring. This constitutes deceptive advertising and a violation of good faith. Child, you can't... Let the boy speak, interrupted Judge Harrison, who was genuinely interested in hearing more. Ethan continued, his voice growing stronger. You're trying to apply pacta sunt servanda as an absolute rule, but even that has limits. When a contract is based on incomplete or misleading information, it can be voided. And furthermore, the Consumer Protection Act, Article 6, Section 3, guarantees the right to clear and adequate information about products and services. Attorney Morgan was clearly losing ground. He tried a new approach. Your Honor, even if there were irregularities, the tenant had a duty to inspect the property before signing the lease. Ethan opened his notebook again. That's partly true, but Article 566 of the Civil Code states that the landlord must deliver the property in a condition suitable for its intended use. If there were hidden defects preventing normal use of the apartment, the responsibility falls on the landlord, not the tenant. Judge Harrison was impressed not only by Ethan's legal knowledge, but also by his ability to apply the law logically and coherently. It was as if the boy had an intuitive understanding of justice. Ethan, said the judge, can you explain what you mean by hidden defects? Of course, sir. Hidden defects are problems that can't be discovered during a normal inspection. In my mum's apartment, the ceiling leak only appeared after the first heavy rain, and the plumbing issues only became obvious when we tried using the shower. These defects existed beforehand but were concealed. Sarah looked at her son with a mix of pride and growing worry. She realized Ethan was drawing too much attention, and it made her nervous. Her whole life, she'd learned to stay invisible, not to make waves, to accept what life gave her without question. Attorney Morgan, increasingly frustrated, tried to dismiss Ethan again. Your Honor, this is a circus. A child can't lead a court proceeding. No one's leading anything, Ethan replied firmly. I'm just helping my mum because she doesn't understand these things and can't afford a lawyer. Wouldn't you want someone to help your family if they needed it? The question hit Attorney Morgan hard. For a moment he seemed thrown off balance. Judge Harrison decided he'd heard enough. The situation was unprecedented, but Ethan's arguments were solid and relevant. I'll call a 2-hour recess to review all points raised. The hearing will resume at 2 p.m. When they left the courtroom, Sarah was visibly nervous. Ethan, sweetheart, are you sure about this? That attorney is very important. He could make things hard for us. Ethan held his mother's hand. Mom, you work so hard, and they wanted you to lose the money you already paid. That's not fair. The law exists to protect people like you. They had lunch at a simple diner near the courthouse. Ethan ordered a veggie sandwich and orange juice, while Sarah was too nervous to eat. Honey, where do you learn all these things? Sometimes you scare me. Ethan chewed thoughtfully before answering. I don't know, Mom. When I read, it's like everything just makes sense in my head. It's like I can see how the laws connect, how they're meant to protect people. But you're a child, Ethan. You should be playing, watching cartoons. I like playing too, Mom, but I love learning even more. And when I see that, I can help. I want to help. Sarah sighed. She had known her son was special since he was very young, but she never imagined it would come to this. What if we lose the case? What if the judge rules you were wrong? Then we'll accept it, Mom. But at least we tried. You always taught me it's important to fight for what's right. When they returned to the courtroom, even more people were present. News of the prodigy boy had spread, and some local reporters were there. Judge Harrison entered with a stern expression. He had spent the last 2 hours carefully reviewing all the arguments and checking the legal citations Ethan had made. To his surprise, everyone was correct and relevant. Resuming proceedings, the judge announced. After thorough analysis of the arguments presented, particularly the points raised by young Ethan, who demonstrated exceptional legal knowledge. "I have reached a decision." Attorney Morgan shifted nervously in his seat. "The rental agreement between Mrs. Sarah Parker and Prestige Realty Group contains flaws that render it void. There was a clear violation of the principle of good faith and omission of essential information about the property's condition." Ethan squeezed his mother's hand, but kept his expression serious. "Therefore, I declare the contract null and void and order the Realty Group to refund all payments made by the tenant, including the security deposit, first month's rent, and administrative fees." Sarah began to cry with relief. That money would make a huge difference in their lives. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I order the Realty Group to cover the costs of relocation and temporary lodging for the family until they find a new home." Attorney Morgan stood up indignantly. "Your Honor, I will appeal this decision. This is outrageous." "That is your right," the judge replied calmly, "but I can assure you the arguments are well-founded." Ethan stood and gave a small bow. To the judge, "Thank you, sir. You were very fair." Judge Harrison smiled for the first time that day. "Ethan, you have an extraordinary gift. Don't waste it." As they left the courthouse, they were surrounded by reporters. Sarah was nervous about all the attention, but Ethan answered questions with the same composure he had shown during the hearing. "How did you learn about the law?" one reporter asked. "I read books while my mum is at work," Ethan replied simply. "Law is interesting because it helps protect people." "Do you want to be a lawyer when you grow up?" Ethan thought for a moment. "I want to help people like my mom, people who work hard but sometimes get treated unfairly. If it's as a lawyer, that's fine. If it's another way, that's fine too." That night, in the small house they shared with Grandma Rose, Ethan's grandmother, they watched the news coverage of the case on the local station. "My famous, a little grandson," Grandma Rose said, running her fingers through Ethan's curly hair. "I always knew you were special." Sarah was worried. "Mom, I don't know if all this attention is good. Ethan's just a child." "But he's a child who brought justice today," his grandmother replied. "He used the gift God gave him to help his family. That's something to be proud of, not worried about." Ethan was quiet, flipping through a constitutional law book he had borrowed from the courthouse library. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" Sarah asked. "I'm fine, Mom. I'm just thinking, do other people go through the same thing we did? Are more people being tricked by these contracts?" Sarah and Grandma Rose exchanged glances. Ethan always thought of others, even when he was the one being helped. "Probably, son," Sarah replied. "But it's not our problem anymore. We won the case." "But it could be our problem, Mum. If I know about these things, maybe I can help. Others too." The following week, Ethan's life changed drastically. The news story about the boy lawyer had spread, and several people began approaching Sarah asking for Ethan's help with legal issues. The first was Mr. Wilson, their neighbor, who was being sued over a debt he claimed he had already paid off. "Mrs. Parker, do you think Ethan could take a look at my papers? I don't understand any of this legal stuff and I can't afford a lawyer." Ethan reviewed Mr. Wilson's documents and discovered he was right. The debt had been settled, but the company hadn't updated their system. "Do you have the payment receipt?" Ethan asked. "I sure do, son. I keep everything safe and sound." "Then it's easy. You go to the notary to file a declaration of payment, then submit a request to clear the debt. If they don't comply, you can sue for emotional damages." Mr. Wilson followed Ethan's advice and resolved his issue in 2 weeks. Soon after, it was Mrs. Brown who was being evicted from her home for non-payment, though she insisted the landlord had never given her the payment slips. Ethan studied the case and advised, "You should deposit the rent amount with the court and prove you tried to pay. It's called consignation payment, and it's covered under the Civil Code." Before long, Sarah and Ethan's home became a neighborhood hub for people with legal troubles. Ethan patiently helped everyone, explaining their rights and next steps. In simple terms, Sarah grew increasingly concerned. "Ethan, my boy, you're spending all your free time helping others. When do you get to be a child?" "Mom, I like helping, and I still play, I still watch TV, just not as much as before." The situation caught the attention of attorney Benjamin Stewart, the lawyer whose firm Sarah worked at as a cleaner. He owned the books Ethan read every night. Attorney Stewart was a 60-year-old man with white hair and a solid reputation as one of the best labor attorneys in the city. He had heard about Ethan through the papers and decided to speak with Sarah. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about your son," Attorney Stewart said one evening as she cleaned his office. Sarah stopped wiping his desk, nervous. "Did he do something wrong, sir? Did he mess with your books?" "No, nothing like that," Attorney Stewart smiled. "Quite the opposite. I've been following what Ethan's been doing in your neighborhood, and I'm impressed. You're not upset that he reads your books?" "Upset? Sarah, your son has a talent I see once in a decade. He doesn't just read my books. He understands them. And more than that, he knows how to apply that knowledge practically." Attorney Stewart leaned back in his chair. "Sarah, may I make a proposal?" "What kind of proposal, sir?" "I'd like to mentor Ethan, teach him in a more structured way, give him access to more resources, maybe even help him enroll in a special program for gifted children." Sarah fell silent for a moment. The offer was tempting, but it also scared her. "Sir, I can't afford these things." "I'm not talking about payment, Sarah. I'm talking about investment. Ethan is an exceptional child, and talents like his should be nurtured. It would be my pleasure to help him grow." Sarah promised to talk to Ethan and give an answer the following week. At home, she discussed Attorney Stewart's proposal with Ethan and Grandma Rose. "What do you think, Ethan?" Sarah asked. Ethan thought carefully before answering. "Mom, I'd like to learn more, but I don't want this to separate us or change our lives in a way you don't like. What if it changes for the better?" "That would be good," Ethan smiled, "but I don't want to stop helping the people in our neighborhood. They need help, and I can give it." Grandma Rose gave her opinion. "Sarah, this boy has a gift. It would be wrong not to let him develop it, but it has to be done carefully so he doesn't lose his humility or forget where he came from." The following week, Sarah accepted Attorney Stewart's proposal, but with a few conditions. "Attorney, I accept your help, but Ethan can't stop going to his regular school, and he wants to keep helping the neighborhood people on weekends." "Perfect," agreed Attorney Stewart. "In fact, I think that's important for his personal growth. Ethan needs to stay connected to his social reality." And so began a new chapter in Ethan's life. 3 times a week after school, he went to Attorney Stewart's office for guided studies. The lawyer had prepared a special program, starting with the fundamentals of general legal theory and moving into more specialized areas. "Ethan," Attorney Stewart said in their first session, "I'm going to teach you not just about laws, but how to use the law as a tool for social justice." "What's social justice?" Ethan asked. "It's when we use laws and institutions to reduce inequality and protect the most vulnerable. It's exactly what you've been doing in your neighborhood." Ethan liked the explanation. That's what he wanted, to use his knowledge to help people like his mother and their neighbors. However, not everything was smooth sailing. At school, Ethan started facing more serious problems. Some teachers felt threatened by his knowledge, and some classmates began bullying him, calling him know-it-all and stuck up. One day, Ethan came home with a black eye. "What happened?" Sarah asked, alarmed. "John Charles and his friends hit me at recess," Ethan replied sadly. "They said I think I'm better than everyone because I've been on TV." Sarah was furious. "I'm talking to the principal first thing tomorrow." "No, Mom. That'll just make things worse." "Ethan, you can't let people hit you." "I know, Mom. But violence doesn't solve violence. There has to be another way." When Attorney Stewart heard what happened, he had a serious talk with Ethan. "Ethan, unfortunately, this can happen when someone stands out. Some people don't like seeing others succeed." "But why, Attorney Stewart? I never said I was better than anyone. Because you represent something they don't have, the chance to grow and develop. That can create jealousy or feelings of inferiority. So what do I do? You keep being yourself. Stay humble, help those who need it, and don't let others' envy make you give up on your dreams." But the problems at school got worse. The principal, Mrs. Thompson, called Sarah in for a meeting. "Mrs. Parker, I need to talk about Ethan. He's causing some disruptions." "What kind of disruptions? Are his grades bad?" "No, quite the opposite. His grades are perfect, but he questions the teachers too much, correcting them during class. It's creating an uncomfortable atmosphere." Sarah sighed. "Principal Ethan doesn't mean any harm. He just loves learning and sometimes knows more than expected for his age. I understand, but he needs to learn self-control. He can't keep showing up the teachers. It's disrespectful. Sarah was torn. On one hand, she understood the school's position. On the other, she didn't want Ethan to lose his thirst for knowledge. At home, she talked to her son. Ethan, the principal said you've been upsetting the teachers. Ethan lowered his head. I don't mean to upset anyone, Mom. But sometimes they say things that are wrong, and I know they're wrong. It's hard to stay quiet. Son, you need to learn that it's not always the time to show what we know. Sometimes it's better to stay silent. Even when we know it's wrong? Sarah didn't know how to respond. She didn't want to teach her son to passively accept incorrect information, but she also didn't want him to get into trouble. The situation became even more complicated when Ethan, during a civics and ethics class, corrected the teacher about a point in the Constitution. The teacher, Mrs. Fletcher, turned red with embarrassment in front of the whole class. Ethan, you're being very disrespectful, she said nervously. I'm sorry, Ma'am. I just wanted to clarify that Article 5 of the Constitution has 78 clauses, not 50 like you said. Are you questioning my competence? No, ma'am. I was just correcting a piece of information. The teacher sent Ethan to the principal's office, and this time the conversation was more serious. Mrs. Parker, the principal, said, Ethan is making it impossible for the teachers to do their jobs. They feel intimidated by an 8-year-old child. But is he right in the corrections he makes? The principal hesitated. Well, most of the time, yes. But that's not the point. The point is, he's disrupting the classroom dynamic. So what's the solution? Maybe it's better to look for a specialized school for gifted children. Ethan clearly isn't adapting to regular education. Sarah left the school devastated. She couldn't afford a private school and didn't know if there were specialized public schools. When Attorney Stewart heard about the situation, he decided to step in. Sarah, I'll make some calls. There are special programs for gifted children, even in the public system. We'll find a solution. Meanwhile, Ethan kept helping people in the neighborhood and more sought his assistance. He had become known as the little lawyer of the area. One particularly touching case was that of Mrs. Wilson, a 70-year-old woman being scammed by a loan company. Ethan, dear, she said, crying, they told me I'd pay $200 a month, but now they're taking $400 from my pension. I don't know what to do anymore. Ethan reviewed the contract and was outraged. Mrs. Wilson, this is abusive. They can only deduct up to 30% of your pension for a loan. And look here, the interest they're charging is way above what's allowed. But what do I do, dear? They said if I don't pay, they'll sue me. You'll come with me to the bank tomorrow. We'll fix this. The next day, Ethan accompanied Mrs. Wilson to the bank. The manager, Mr. Charles, initially tried to ignore the child. Mrs. Wilson, let's discuss your loan. The child can wait in the reception area. No, Ethan said firmly. I'm here representing Mrs. Wilson, and I'll be part of the conversation. The manager laughed. A child representing? That's ridiculous. Ethan didn't back down. Sir, Mrs. Wilson's loan violates Federal Reserve regulations. You're deducting 40% of her pension when the limit is 30%. Plus the interest is 50% above the prime rate, which qualifies as predatory lending. The manager stopped laughing and looked more closely at Ethan. How do you know this? Because I study. And I know if you don't fix this now, Mrs. Wilson can sue the bank for abusive charges and even claim damages. Ethan's tone was calm but firm. The manager excused himself to consult his supervisor. 15 minutes later, they returned with an offer. We can renegotiate Mrs. Wilson's loan. We'll reduce the deduction to 25% of her pension and adjust the interest. And what about the overcharges? Ethan asked. What do you mean? You charged improper fees for 6 months. That money must be refunded or deducted from the outstanding balance. The supervisor sighed and agreed with Ethan's proposal. Mrs. Wilson left the bank crying with joy. Ethan, my boy, how can I ever thank you? You saved me. No need to thank me, Mrs. Wilson. Just don't let anyone take advantage of you again, okay? Cases like this multiplied. Ethan helped Mr. Joseph secure disability benefits that had been denied by the Social Security Administration, guided Mrs. Carmen on her rights after being wrongfully terminated, and assisted several families with housing loan issues. Each victory strengthened Ethan's reputation, but also increased the pressure on him. He was just a child, yet he carried the weight of being many people's hope. Attorney Stewart noticed Ethan was becoming too serious for his age. "Ethan, you've been carrying too much. An 8-year-old shouldn't have this many responsibilities." "But Attorney Stewart, these people need help. If I can help, why shouldn't I?" "Because you also need time to be a child, to play, to discover things beyond the law." Ethan thought for a moment. "Attorney Stewart, when I help people, I feel good. It's like I'm doing something important. It makes me happy." "I understand, Ethan, but promise me you'll set aside time for yourself too. To play ball, spend time with other kids, watch cartoons." "I promise," Ethan smiled. But the promise was hard to keep. Each week, more people sought his help, and Ethan couldn't say no to those suffering injustice. The situation grew even more complicated when attorney Richard Morgan, the lawyer who had lost the case against Ethan in court, decided to retaliate. Attorney Morgan had been deeply unsettled by his defeat at the hands of a child. His firm had lost credibility, and several major clients had cancelled contracts. He blamed Ethan. During a meeting with other lawyers from Prestige Realty Group, Attorney Morgan laid out his plan. "That kid is hurting our business. He needs to be stopped." "How so, Richard?" asked Attorney Christine, a partner at the firm. "I'll file a complaint with Child Protective Services, claiming the child is being exploited by his mother. An 8-year-old shouldn't be involved in legal matters like this." "Will that work?" "Absolutely. I'll argue he's being deprived of his childhood and used for financial gain. They'll have to investigate." And so he did. He drafted a detailed complaint to Child Protective Services, alleging Ethan was being exploited by his mother and that his participation in legal issues was harmful to his development. The complaint reached Sandra Oliver, a serious and dedicated caseworker who took child protection very seriously. She decided to make an unannounced visit to Ethan's home to assess the situation. It was a Thursday evening when Sandra knocked on the door of the small house where Ethan lived with his mother and grandmother. "Good evening," she said, showing her identification. "I'm Sandra Oliver from Child Protective Services. I need to speak with Mrs. Sarah Parker." Sarah opened the door nervously. Her first reaction was panic. "Did something happen to Ethan? He's fine, he's right here. May I come in?" "I need to discuss a complaint we received." Sarah invited Sandra inside. The house was small but clean and tidy. Ethan was at the kitchen table doing homework, surrounded by books. "Ethan," Sarah called anxiously, "come here. This lady needs to talk to us." Ethan approached politely. "Good evening, ma'am." Sandra studied the boy carefully. He seemed well cared for, healthy, and nothing in his behavior suggested suffering or exploitation. "Ethan, can I speak with you privately?" "Of course," replied the boy, leading Sandra to the small room. "Ethan, are you being forced to do anything?" "You don't want to." "What do you mean, ma'am?" "About these legal matters, about helping people with legal problems. Is someone making you do this?" Ethan seemed genuinely confused. "No, ma'am, no one forces me to do anything. I like helping people." "But wouldn't you rather be playing, doing things kids do?" "I do play, ma'am. I play soccer with my friends. On weekends I watch TV. But what I really love is studying and helping people." Sandra spoke with Ethan for nearly an hour, asking about his routine, his relationship with his mother, and how he felt about all the attention he received. Then she spoke with Sarah and Grandma Rose separately. "Mrs. Parker, how did Ethan get involved in legal matters?" Sarah told the whole story, from the first case in court to the current situation. "I never forced him into anything," said Sarah, with tears in her eyes. "Ethan has always been like this ever since he was little. He learns things on his own. And financially. Do you earn money from this?" "No, ma'am. Ethan has never charged anyone. He helps because he wants to." Sandra also spoke with Grandma Rose. "Do you think Ethan is being harmed by this situation?" "Listen, dear," replied the grandmother, "this boy was born different. Since he was little, he's wanted to know everything, to learn everything. If he's helping people, it's because God gave him this gift. But shouldn't he be playing more, being more of a child? He does play, but his happiness is different. It comes from seeing he can help others." After the conversations, Sandra inspected the house. She checked Ethan's room, his toys, his books, and his school routine. "Ethan," she said before leaving, "if anyone ever forces you to do something you don't want, or if you're not happy with this situation, you can come to me, okay?" "Okay, Mum. But I am happy. I like my life." Sandra left the house with mixed feelings. On one hand, there were no signs of exploitation or mistreatment. On the other, Ethan's situation was truly unusual for an 8-year-old. She decided to investigate further before making any decisions. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Sandra sought out attorney Benjamin Stewart for his opinion on Ethan. "Attorney, you interact with Ethan regularly. In your professional opinion, is he being harmed by this exposure?" Attorney Stewart thought carefully before answering. "Sandra, may I call you that? I've worked in law for 40 years, and I can assure you, Ethan is not being exploited. He has a genuine passion for legal knowledge. But isn't he missing out on childhood? He's living his childhood his way. Ethan isn't an ordinary child. He's a prodigy, and prodigies have different needs and interests. Couldn't this be harmful to his emotional development? On the contrary, Ethan is developing a sense of purpose and social usefulness that's admirable. He feels valued and useful. That's very positive for any child." Sandra also went to Ethan's school to hear the teachers' opinions. The principal, Mrs. Thompson, was less positive. "Ethan is a different child, very intelligent, but he struggles to relate to his peers." "What kind of struggles?" "He feels superior to others. He always wants to show he knows more than everyone else." Sandra also spoke with some teachers. Opinions were divided. Some saw Ethan as a troubled child who disrupted classes. Others recognized his exceptional talent. The English teacher, Mrs. Helen, offered a different perspective. "Ethan is a special child. He has a thirst for knowledge. I've never seen in 40 years of teaching. The problem is that the school isn't prepared to handle a child like him." "How so?" "Our education system is standardized. We don't have resources for gifted children. Ethan gets bored in class because the material is too basic for him." Sandra was beginning to understand that the problem wasn't Ethan being exploited, but rather the system not being equipped to handle an exceptionally intelligent child. She decided to consult a psychologist specializing in gifted children, Dr. Marion Cooper. "Doctor, I'd like your opinion on a case. I have an 8-year-old with an apparently very high IQ who gets involved in legal matters. Is this harmful?" Dr. Marion listened to Sandra's full account before giving her opinion. "Sandra, gifted children have special needs. They require intellectual stimulation appropriate to their cognitive development level, not their chronological age. But an 8-year-old involved in legal issues isn't concerning. It depends on the context. If the child is being forced or exploited, yes, but if they have genuine interest and proper support, it can benefit their development. How can I tell the difference? Observe the child's behavior. Does he seem happy? Are his choices respected? Does he have time for other activities? If the answers are positive, there's likely no issue." Dr. Marion suggested Sandra arrange a full psychological evaluation for Ethan to better understand his cognitive and emotional profile. Sandra decided to request this evaluation. She explained the situation to Sarah. "Mrs. Parker, this isn't against you. It's just to better understand Ethan's needs and ensure he's being properly cared for." Sarah grew nervous but agreed. "If it's for Ethan's good, I accept." The psychological evaluation was conducted by Dr. Marion Cooper herself. Over 3 sessions, she administered various tests to Ethan, assessing not just his IQ but also his emotional and social development. The results were surprising, even for those expecting something exceptional. "Ethan has an IQ of 165, Dr. Marion explained to Sandra and Sarah. "This places him in the 99.9th percentile of the population. He's what we call profoundly gifted." "What does this mean in practice?" Sandra asked. "It means his intellectual capacity is comparable to that of a college-educated adult. That's why he can grasp complex legal concepts." "And emotionally, how is he doing?" "Surprisingly well adjusted. Ethan has emotional maturity above average for his age, which is common in gifted children. He shows no signs of stress, anxiety, or depression. What about him helping people with legal problems? In my professional opinion, this activity benefits Ethan. It gives purpose and meaning to his knowledge, boosts his self-esteem, and strengthens his sense of social usefulness. Dr. Marion made several recommendations. Ethan needs intellectual stimulation suited to his level. Regular school isn't enough for him. I recommend enrolling him in a special program for gifted children. Does he need to stop helping people? Sarah asked. Not necessarily, but he needs proper supervision and clear boundaries to avoid burnout. Sandra was satisfied with the evaluation. It was clear Ethan wasn't being exploited. He was simply expressing his exceptional talents naturally. She prepared a report to dismiss Attorney Morgan's complaint. After a thorough investigation, including specialized psychological evaluation, I conclude that the minor Ethan Parker is not being exploited or harmed. He is a profoundly gifted child who demonstrates a genuine interest in legal matters. I recommend regular psychological monitoring and enrollment in a specialized educational program. When Attorney Morgan learned his complaint had been dismissed, he was furious. He decided to try a different approach. He sought out Attorney Frank Miller, president of the local bar association. Frank, I need to talk to you about an irregular situation happening here in town. What situation, Richard? There's an 8-year-old child practicing law without a license. He's giving legal advice to low-income individuals. Attorney Miller was intrigued. A child, how so? Attorney Morgan recounted Ethan's story, obviously emphasizing the aspects he found problematic. This is unauthorized practice of law, he said. The child is encroaching on our professional domain. Attorney Miller promised to investigate. He appointed a committee to review Ethan's case, composed of 3 experienced attorneys: Attorney Paul Henry, Attorney Anna Paul, and Attorney Charles Edward. They began by visiting some of the people Ethan had helped to understand exactly what the child was doing. Mrs. Wilson, the woman with the payroll loan issue, welcomed the attorneys into her home. That boy Ethan saved me, she said. The bank was stealing from me, and I didn't know what to do. He explained my rights and even went with me to resolve it. Did he charge you anything? Asked Attorney Paul Henry. Not a cent. He never wanted a dime. Said he was helping because he wanted to. Did he present himself as a lawyer? No. He always said he was just a boy who liked studying law and wanted to help people. They spoke with Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Carmen, Mr. Joseph, and others Ethan had assisted. All the stories were similar. Ethan never claimed to be a lawyer, never charged fees, and always made it clear he was just a child who enjoyed studying. The committee also spoke with Attorney Stewart. In your opinion, is Ethan practicing law illegally? Absolutely not, Attorney Stewart replied firmly. Ethan guides people about their rights, but always suggests they consult a lawyer for formal representation. He provides lay consultation, which isn't prohibited. But he accompanies people to banks, courts, as emotional support and guidance. He never presents himself as a legal representative. It's very different from practicing law. Attorney Charles Edward asked a key question. What about the impact on local attorneys? Some colleagues complain they're losing clients. Attorney Stewart was direct. Charles, the people Ethan helps are low-income individuals who could never afford a lawyer. They'd either accept the injustice or try to defend themselves. Ethan isn't taking clients from anyone. The committee also reviewed some of Ethan's cases, checking if his advice was correct and if he had crossed any ethical or legal boundaries. To some members' surprise, all of Ethan's guidance was technically accurate. He demonstrated a deep understanding of legislation and applied legal principles appropriately. Attorney Anna Paul summarized the committee's findings. We found no irregularities in what Ethan is doing. He provides free legal guidance to low-income individuals, always clarifying he's not a lawyer. This doesn't constitute unauthorized practice. Attorney Miller was impressed by the committee's report. He decided to meet Ethan in person. He scheduled a visit to the Parker family home. He arrived accompanied by Attorney Stewart, who made the introductions. Ethan, this is Attorney Frank Miller, president of the local bar association. Ethan greeted him respectfully. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Attorney Miller." "Ethan, can I talk to you about what you've been doing to help people?" "Of course, sir." Attorney Miller asked Ethan several questions, testing his knowledge and understanding of the ethical boundaries of his activities. "Ethan, do you know the difference between giving legal guidance and practicing law?" "Yes, sir. Legal guidance is explaining to people what their rights are and how to proceed. Practicing law means officially representing someone, filing petitions, speaking on their behalf in court. And what do you do?" "I only provide guidance, sir. When someone needs official representation, I always tell them to seek out a real attorney." Attorney Miller was impressed by Ethan's maturity and knowledge. "Ethan, are you interested in becoming a lawyer when you grow up?" "Yes, sir. But I want to be a lawyer who helps poor people, those who can't afford one." "Why?" "Because justice shouldn't only be for those with money, sir. The law is meant to protect everyone, especially the most vulnerable." Attorney Miller left Ethan's house completely convinced there was no wrongdoing. On the contrary, he was amazed by the child's social calling. In the final report he submitted to the Bar Association's board, Attorney Miller wrote, "Ethan Parker, age 8, provides free legal guidance to underprivileged individuals ethically and within legal boundaries. This does not constitute unauthorized practice of law. I recommend he be invited to visit the Bar Association headquarters and receive recognition for his social work." The Bar Association's board approved Attorney Miller's recommendation. Ethan would be invited to a special session where he would receive an honor. When Attorney Morgan learned of the decision, he grew even angrier. He decided to try one last move. He sought out some journalists and attempted to start a campaign against Ethan. "This child is being exploited and harming the local legal profession," he said in interviews. "This needs to be stopped." But the strategy backfired. The journalists investigated Attorney Morgan's accusations and discovered he had lost a case to Ethan in court. This cast doubt on his motivations. An investigative journalist, Charles Mendenhall from the City Chronicle, decided to do a special feature on Ethan. He spent a week following the boy and his activities. Charles witnessed Ethan helping Mrs. Jenkins, a 75-year-old woman who was being evicted from her home for failing to pay her property tax. "Mrs. Jenkins," Ethan explained patiently, "you're entitled to a property tax exemption because you're a senior over 65, and this is your only home. The municipal code allows for this, but they told me I had to pay everything," Mrs. Jenkins replied, crying. "No, you don't. Let's go to City Hall tomorrow to sort this out." Charles accompanied Ethan and Mrs. Jenkins to City Hall. The boy spoke to the responsible official. "Sir, Mrs. Jenkins qualifies for a property tax exemption under Municipal Code 2.847. She's a senior, retired with a minimum wage income, and this property is her only residence." The official, initially reluctant, checked the law and confirmed Ethan was correct. Mrs. Jenkins was exempted from payment, and the eviction process was cancelled. Charles was moved by the scene. Mrs. Jenkins hugged Ethan, crying, "My angel, you saved my home. How can I thank you?" "You don't have to thank me, Mrs. Jenkins. Just take good care of yourself, okay?" Charles Mendenhall's article was published on the front page of the newspaper under the headline, "The Legal Angel. 8-year-old boy devotes his life to helping those in need." The story had a very positive impact. Other local media outlets began seeking Ethan out for interviews. Attorney Morgan, realizing that his attempts to undermine Ethan were only strengthening the boy's reputation further, decided to completely change his strategy. He reached out to a colleague in New York, Attorney Oliver Sanders, who worked at a major law firm. "Oliver, I have a case here that might interest your firm." "What kind of case, Richard?" "There's an 8-year-old boy gaining a lot of attention for his legal knowledge. It would be a great marketing move to hire him as a junior consultant or something along those lines." Attorney Sanders was intrigued. "An 8-year-old? Is this serious?" "Very serious. He's already been on TV several times and received recognition from the local bar association. Imagine the impact if a major New York firm hired this kid." Attorney Sanders decided to investigate. He asked his team to gather information on Ethan and was impressed by what they found. He made plans to visit Boston to meet Ethan in person. Attorney Sanders arrived on a Thursday. driving a black BMW, and went straight to Ethan's house. Sarah answered the door. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm attorney Oliver Sanders from New York. I'd like to speak with Ethan." Sarah was nervous about the unexpected visit from someone so well-dressed. "Are you related to us? You share our last name, Parker." "No, ma'am, it's just a coincidence. I'm an attorney, and I'd like to make Ethan an offer." Ethan appeared curious. "Good afternoon, sir. Ethan, may I speak with you and your mother about an opportunity?" They sat in the small living room, and Attorney Sanders explained his proposal. "Ethan, I represent one of the largest law firms in the country. We'd like to offer you a contract as a special consultant." "How so?" Sarah asked. "Ethan would work with us in his free time, analyzing special cases, participating in advertising campaigns. We're offering a scholarship to a top-tier private school and a monthly salary of $5,000. Sarah nearly fell out of her chair. $5,000 was more than 3 times what she earned. "And what exactly would Ethan have to do?" she asked. "Attend some meetings, appear in promotional materials, maybe give a few interviews representing the firm." Ethan listened quietly before asking, "What about the people in our neighborhood? Could I keep helping them?" Attorney Sanders hesitated. "Well, that might create a conflict of interest. It would be better to focus on working with our firm." Ethan shook his head. "Then I can't accept, sir. Thank you for the offer, but I can't abandon the people who need me." Attorney Sanders was surprised by the refusal. "Ethan, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We're talking about a lot of money, top-quality education." "Sir, money isn't the most important thing in life. These people trust me. I can't leave them." Sarah was torn. On one hand, she admired her son's loyalty. On the other, she knew this opportunity could change their lives completely. "Ethan," she said, "maybe we can negotiate. You could work with the firm and still help people on weekends." Attorney Sanders shook his head. "That wouldn't be possible. Our firm can't be associated with independent consulting. It would be an image problem." Ethan was firm. "Then I can't accept. I'm sorry, sir." Attorney Sanders tried to argue further, but realized Ethan wouldn't change his mind. He left the house frustrated. "Richard told me it would be easy to convince this kid," he muttered to himself. In truth, Attorney Morgan had suggested the proposal hoping Ethan would accept and move to New York, effectively stopping him from causing trouble in Boston. But the plan didn't work. Ethan had very clear values about loyalty and social commitment. Sarah talked to her son that night. "Ethan, are you sure you made the right choice? It was so much money." "I'm sure, Mom. We don't need a lot of money to be happy, and I promised these people I would help them. I can't break my word." Grandma Rose, who had overheard the conversation, gave her opinion. "Sarah, that boy has his heart in the right place. Money comes and goes, but character is forever." The refusal of attorney Oliver Sanders' offer only strengthened Ethan's reputation in the community. When the news spread, people were even more impressed by the boy's integrity. Mr. Johnson, who owned the neighborhood grocery store, commented, "That boy is truly special. He turned down a fortune so he wouldn't abandon us. It's hard to find people like that these days." The Bar Association tribute took place 2 weeks later. Ethan was invited to a formal session in the association's auditorium. Attorney Frank Miller introduced Ethan to those present. "Ladies and gentlemen of the bar, today we have the privilege of honoring a very special person. Ethan Parker, just 8 years old, has shown that a calling for social justice knows no age." Ethan, dressed in his best blue suit, stepped onto the stage, shy but determined. "Ethan," said Attorney Miller, "on behalf of the Bar Association, Massachusetts chapter, we want to recognize your work for social justice and the rights of those in need." He handed Ethan a commemorative plaque and a certificate of recognition. Ethan approached the microphone. "Thank you, Attorney Miller. Thank you to all the attorneys here. I want to say one thing. The law is useless if it isn't used to protect those who need it most. You are real attorneys. You studied hard for this. I ask that you always remember the poor who also need justice." The packed auditorium gave a standing ovation. Many attorneys present were moved by Ethan's simple yet profound words. Attorney Morgan, who had attended out of professional obligation, watched bitterly. He had failed in all his attempts to undermine Ethan, and now he saw the boy being celebrated by the entire profession. After the ceremony, several attorneys approached Ethan to talk. Some offered future internships, others wanted to learn more about his work in the neighborhood. Attorney Henry Oliver, a human rights lawyer, made an interesting proposal. "Ethan, how about we create a joint project? My firm could provide legal support for the more complex cases you identify in your neighborhood." "How would that work?" asked Ethan, intrigued. "You'd continue doing the initial screening and guidance. When needed, you'd refer the cases to us. We wouldn't charge fees. It would be pro bono work." Ethan liked the idea. "That way, I could help even more people." "Exactly. And you'd learn by following more detailed cases." Attorney Stewart thought the proposal was excellent. It's a perfect partnership. Ethan would identify the cases, provide initial guidance, and Attorney Oliver would offer technical support when needed. And so, the Justice for All project was born, a collaboration between Ethan and Attorney Oliver's firm. The project started by assisting 5 families a week. Ethan screened the cases, gave basic advice, and referred them to Attorney Oliver when formal legal support was needed. The first case was Mrs. Sebastian's, an 82-year-old woman being swindled by a funeral plan company. "Mrs. Sebastian," Ethan explained, "this company is charging unfair prices and has illegal clauses in the contract. I'll ask Attorney Oliver to review the case." Attorney Oliver confirmed Ethan's assessment and filed a lawsuit against the company. Result: Mrs. Sebastian had her contract cancelled and received back all the money she had paid improperly. The success of the first case motivated everyone involved. In no time, the Justice for All project was assisting 15 families a week. Ethan had found the perfect way to expand his impact without abandoning his principles. He remained the first point of contact for people, keeping his connection to the community, but now had professional support for more complex cases. Attorney Stewart watched Ethan's development with paternal pride. Ethan is maturing quickly. Each day his understanding of the law grows more sophisticated. "He's still a child, Attorney Stewart," Sarah reminded him. "Sometimes I worry he's growing up too fast." "Sarah, Ethan has a special gift. Our responsibility is to help him develop that gift in a healthy way, respecting his age, but not limiting his potential." The issue of formal education remained a challenge. Ethan had been transferred to a special school for gifted children, but he still struggled to adapt. At the new school, the Institute for Intellectual Development, Ethan met other students with exceptional abilities, though in different areas than his own. There was Carla, a 9-year-old math prodigy, Brian, a 10-year-old science genius, and Anna, an 8-year-old gifted in linguistics. At first, Ethan was excited to be among intellectual peers. "Mom, it's the first time I've been in a school where I'm not the only different one." But he soon discovered that being gifted in different areas created complex dynamics. Carla, used to being the smartest in class, grew frustrated when Ethan demonstrated knowledge of mathematical logic applied to law that she didn't possess. "You're not that special," she snapped during an argument. "Anyone can memorize laws." "I don't memorize," Ethan replied calmly. "I understand the connections between laws and how they apply in real life." Their teacher, Mrs. Patricia, had to intervene. "Children, each of you has unique talents. There's no need for competition." But competition was inevitable. Every gifted child was used to being the special one at their previous school. Being in an environment with other gifted students created insecurities. Ethan, accustomed to using his knowledge to help people, struggled to adapt to the more academic and competitive setting. "Attorney Stewart," he said during one of their mentoring sessions, "I don't really like the new school." "Why, Ethan? Everyone there just wants to prove they're smarter than the others. I don't like that. I like using what I know to help people, not to show I'm better than someone." Attorney Stewart considered Ethan's concern. "Ethan, that's an important lesson. Intelligence without purpose is empty. You've already found your purpose, helping others. That gives you an advantage over your peers." "How so?" "Your classmates are still figuring out what their talents are for. You already know. That makes you more intellectually mature, not just smarter." The conversation helped Ethan see the new school differently. Instead of competing with his classmates, he began helping them find purposes for their talents. He talked to Carla about how math could solve social problems. He discussed with Brian how science could improve people's lives. He explained to Anna how linguistics could aid legal communication. Gradually, the class dynamic shifted. Instead of pure competition, collaboration began to form. The semester's final project was group-based. They would create multidisciplinary solutions to real community problems. Ethan suggested they analyze the lack of daycare centers in his neighborhood. Carla calculated the necessary space and resources. Brian studied the infrastructure and safety issues. Anna developed a clear communication guide for parents and staff. Together, they created a comprehensive project that was presented to the Department of Education. The Secretary of Education, Dr. Rachel Sanders, was impressed with the proposal. It's amazing to see children so young thinking of practical solutions to real community problems. The project wasn't implemented immediately, but served as a foundation for future studies on expanding the municipal daycare network. Ethan was satisfied. See, Attorney Stewart, when we use our intelligence to help others, everyone benefits. The success of the school project strengthened Ethan's confidence in his calling. He was on the right path, but not everything was smooth sailing. Attorney Morgan, frustrated with Ethan's continued success, decided to try a subtler and more dangerous approach. He contacted some colleagues in Washington, D.C., and suggested Ethan's case be brought before the Federal Bar Association as a concerning precedent. Just imagine, he argued in phone calls, if this spreads across the country. Children posing as legal consultants, people skipping hiring lawyers because they think a child can solve their problems. Attorney Richard Ferguson, a Federal Bar Association counselor, decided to investigate the situation. He sent a special committee to Boston to evaluate Ethan's case. The committee consisted of nationally renowned attorneys, Attorney Sandra Applegate, an expert in professional ethics, Attorney Mark Vincent, a specialist in children's rights, and Attorney John Charles, an expert in legal practice. They arrived in Boston on a Monday and began their investigations discreetly. First, they spoke with Attorney Frank, the local Bar Association president. Frank, we want to understand exactly what's happening here with this child. Attorney Frank recounted Ethan's entire story, from his first case in court to the current project with Attorney Henry. In your opinion, asked Attorney Sandra, is there any irregularity in this situation? None, Attorney Frank replied firmly. Ethan doesn't practice law. He guides lay people about basic rights, always within ethical boundaries. But doesn't this harm the local legal profession? On the contrary, Ethan identifies cases and refers them to lawyers when necessary. He's expanding access to justice, not harming our profession. The committee also spoke with Attorney Henry about his partnership with Ethan. Doctor, how exactly does this collaboration work? Ethan does initial screening and guidance. When he identifies the need for formal legal representation, he refers the case to my firm. It's a partnership that increases our efficiency in social assistance. Does Ethan participate in legal proceedings? No. He may observe to learn, but we always make it clear he has no official role in the case. Attorney Mark Vincent asked. An important question. In your opinion, is this exposure harming the child's development? Absolutely not. Ethan is developing a sense of social responsibility, leadership, and maturity. Of course, we monitor to avoid overburdening him, but so far it's been very positive. The committee also wanted to meet Ethan personally. They scheduled a visit to his home on a Thursday afternoon. Ethan greeted them politely, wearing a simple but well-pressed dress shirt. Good afternoon, sirs. My mother said you wanted to speak with me. Attorney Sandra began the conversation. Ethan, we're from the National Bar Association and came to better understand what you do here. I help people who have legal problems but don't know how to solve them, Ethan replied simply. How do you do that? I listen to their problems, see which laws apply and explain their rights. If it's something simple, they can handle it themselves. If it's too complicated, I'll tell them to see Attorney Henry. Attorney John Charles tested Ethan's knowledge. Ethan, can you explain the difference between eventual intent and conscious negligence? Ethan didn't hesitate. Eventual intent is when someone doesn't directly want the outcome, but accepts that it might happen and takes the risk. Conscious negligence is when someone foresees the outcome, but genuinely believes they can avoid it. Can you give an example? If someone drives drunk, knowing they might kill someone and thinks, if I kill someone, so be it. That's eventual. Intent. If someone drives drunk thinking, I drive well even when drunk, I won't kill anyone, as that's conscious negligence. The committee was impressed by the precision of his answer. Attorney Mark Vincent asked about the personal aspect. Ethan, do you feel pressured to help people? Does anyone force you? No, sir. I like helping. It makes me happy to know I can use what I've learned to improve someone's life. Do you have time to play, to be a kid? Yes, I do. I play soccer with my friends, watch TV and play with my cousins, but I also like studying and helping people. What do you want to be when you grow up? A lawyer, sir, but I want to be a lawyer who helps poor people, who doesn't abandon tough cases just because they don't pay well. The conversation with Ethan lasted 2 hours. The committee asked technical, ethical and personal questions. Ethan answered them all naturally and precisely. When they left the house, the 3 council members were visibly impressed. I've never seen anything like it, commented attorney John Charles. This child has more legal knowledge than many licensed attorneys. And most importantly, added attorney Sandra, he has a very mature ethical understanding. He knows exactly where the boundaries of his actions lie. Attorney C. Mark Vincent was categorical. There's no irregularity here. Ethan is providing a valuable social service, always within ethical and legal limits. The committee prepared a report for the Bar Association. After a detailed investigation, we conclude that Ethan Parker is not engaging in the unauthorized practice of law. His activities consist of basic legal guidance for underprivileged individuals, always with proper referrals to attorneys when necessary. We recommend his work be recognized as a model for access to justice and social responsibility. When Attorney Morgan learned the result, he was desperate. All his attempts to harm Ethan had failed. On the contrary, every investigation only strengthened the boy's reputation. He decided to try one last desperate move: create a situation that would force Ethan to make a mistake. Attorney Morgan contacted an old client, Mr. Benedict, who had serious financial problems and was being sued for multiple debts. Benedict, I know someone who can help you with these cases for free. Who? A very good legal consultant. He helps underprivileged people for free. Attorney Morgan deliberately didn't mention it was a child. He hoped Ethan, while trying to help Mr. Benedict, would end up crossing ethical boundaries. Mr. Benedict sought Ethan out on a Friday. Son, I was told you help people with legal problems. Yes, sir. What's your issue? Mr. Benedict explained. His situation: he owed money to 3 banks, was being sued by a furniture store, had bad credit with the credit bureau, and had just received a notice of asset seizure. Ethan carefully reviewed all the documents. It was a very complex case involving multiple simultaneous lawsuits. Mr. Benedict, your case is too complicated for me to handle alone. You need a real attorney. I'll refer you to Attorney Henry. But young man, I was told you were very good, that you could solve anything. I help where I can, sir. Benedict, but I know my limits. This case needs someone with more experience. Attorney Morgan had instructed Mr. Benedict to insist that Ethan handle the case personally. Son, I don't have money for a lawyer. If you don't help me, I'll lose everything. Ethan was moved by the plea but stood his ground. Mr. Benedict, I understand your situation, but it would be irresponsible of me to try to handle something so complex. I'll speak to Attorney Henry so he can assist you free of charge. And that's exactly what Ethan did. He approached Attorney Henry and explained Mr. Benedict's case. Attorney Henry, this gentleman is in a very difficult situation. He needs urgent help but can't afford to pay. Attorney Henry agreed to take Mr. Benedict's case pro bono. He managed to negotiate the debts, set up payment plans, and prevent the seizure of assets. Attorney Morgan was frustrated once again. Ethan had acted exactly as he should have, recognizing the limits of his competence and referring the case to a qualified professional. It was the final proof that Ethan had exceptional maturity and responsibility for his age. At 9 years old, Ethan had become a reference in his community and an example of how exceptional talents can be used for social good. But perhaps the greatest test of his maturity was yet to come, when he would become involved in a case that would challenge not only his legal knowledge, but also his courage and determination. The case reached Ethan through Patricia, a 17-year-old girl who showed up at his house one Sunday afternoon, visibly nervous and frightened. "Ethan, I need your help," she said, her hands trembling. "What happened, Patricia? It's about the company where I work. They're doing wrong things to the employees and I don't know what to do." Ethan invited her inside to talk calmly. Sarah offered her a glass of water and sat down to listen as well. "Tell me everything from the beginning," said Ethan. Patricia worked at a clothing factory in the industrial district. She and other young employees were being subjected to abusive working conditions, 12-hour shifts without overtime pay, poor restroom facilities, lack of safety equipment, and constant verbal harassment from supervisors. "The worst part is they threaten to fire anyone who complains," Patricia explained. "And we need the job." Ethan listened carefully to every detail. It was clearly a case of systematic labor rights violations. "Patricia, what you're going through is criminal. It's akin to slave labor." "But Ethan, what can we do?" "If we report it, we'll be fired and left with no money to support our families," Ethan thought carefully. It was a very serious case that required immediate action, but also extreme caution. "Patricia, I'll help you, but we'll have to do this very carefully. First, you need to gather evidence of what's happening." "What kind of evidence?" "Photos of the working conditions, recordings of the supervisors being abusive, records of your work hours. Anything that proves what you're saying." Ethan also explained that the case would need formal legal support. "I'll talk to Attorney Henry so he can prepare a labor lawsuit, but you'll have to be brave and willing to file an official complaint." Patricia was scared. "What if they find out it was us who reported them? The law protects whistleblowers. They can't fire you for that, and if they try, the compensation they'll have to pay will be very high." Ethan also suggested an additional strategy. "Let's reach out to the union. They're obligated to protect you." "The union, they've never cared about us, because you've never approached them officially before. When you file a formal complaint with evidence, they'll have to act." Ethan accompanied Patricia to the union the following Monday. The union president, Mr. Marcus, initially tried to downplay the situation. "Sweetheart, this is normal in factories. You're young, you don't know how things work." Ethan stepped in. "Mr. Marcus, with all due respect, 12-hour shifts without overtime pay aren't normal. It's a violation of the labor code. Lack of safety equipment is a crime. Workplace harassment is a crime." Mr. Marcus glared at Ethan. "Kid, who are you to talk about labor law? I'm someone who studies these things, and I know you have a legal obligation to protect union workers." Ethan cited specific articles from labor legislation and the union's bylaws. Mr. Marcus grew visibly uncomfortable. "Look, I'll see what I can do." "No, sir," Ethan said firmly. "You'll conduct an inspection at the factory this week. It's the union's duty to oversee working conditions." Mr. Marcus tried to dodge, but Ethan knew the legal responsibilities. Serve unions well. In the end, he had to agree to the inspection. Meanwhile, Patricia and her co-workers gathered evidence of the violations. They photographed dirty bathrooms, broken equipment, and recorded audio of abusive supervisors. Attorney Henry reviewed the material. "Ethan, this is very serious. We'll file a civil lawsuit against the company. It's a clear case of mass labor rights violations, and the women will be protected. I'll request an injunction to prevent their dismissal during the proceedings, and I'll demand immediate corrections to the working conditions." The lawsuit was filed on a Thursday. By Friday, company representatives approached Patricia at work. "Patricia, we know you're involved in this complaint against the company." "I didn't do anything wrong," she replied nervously. "No one said you did. We just want to talk. Maybe we can reach an agreement." Patricia immediately sought Ethan. "They want to make a deal with me. What do I do?" "Don't agree to anything without Attorney Henry present, and don't sign any papers." Ethan accompanied Patricia to the meeting with the company's representatives. It was held in the factory's office with the administrative director, Mr. Paul, and the company's lawyer, Attorney Carla. "Patricia," Mr. Paul said, We know you're a good employee. We'd like to resolve this amicably." "What kind of resolution?" asked Attorney Henry, who was also present. "We're willing to improve working conditions gradually. In exchange, we'd like the lawsuit withdrawn." Ethan listened carefully. The proposal was too vague. "When you say gradually, how long are we talking?" Attorney Carla replied, "An improvement plan over 6 months. And what guarantees?" "Do we have these changes will actually happen?" Ethan pressed. "You have the company's word," said Mr. Paul. Ethan shook his head. "Words mean nothing. We need a formal agreement with specific deadlines and penalties for non-compliance." Attorney Henry backed Ethan's stance. The company can present a detailed timeline with clear goals and an independent verification system. The meeting ended without an agreement. The company wasn't willing to commit formally to specific changes. The following week, the situation escalated. The Department of Labor Prosecution got involved and conducted a surprise inspection at the factory. The prosecutors found exactly what Patricia had reported: unsafe working conditions, safety violations, and abusive hours. The company was heavily fined and had to sign a Conduct Adjustment Agreement, CAA, with strict deadlines to correct the violations. Patricia and the other employees were protected against retaliation, and the company had to implement immediate changes in the working conditions. "Ethan," said Patricia, emotional, "you saved all of us. Now we can work with dignity." "You were the ones who had the courage to speak up," Ethan replied. "I just helped show the way. The case made waves in the local press." Ethan appeared in the newspapers again, now as a defender of workers' rights. Attorney Morgan, who had been keeping tabs on Ethan's every move, grew even more irritated. The boy wasn't just continuing to help people, he was now taking on powerful companies. He decided to try a different approach. He sought out some influential business owners in the city and tried to convince them that Ethan posed a threat to their interests. "That boy is setting a dangerous precedent," Attorney Morgan argued in a private meeting. "If we let him continue, others will follow his example. Soon we'll have children organizing labor movements all over the city." Some business owners were worried about the possibility, but others disagreed. "Morgan, what the boy is doing is fair," said Mr. Silver, owner of a supermarket chain. "He's defending workers' basic rights. Companies that follow the law have nothing to fear." Attorney Morgan failed to build the coalition he had hoped for against Ethan. Most business owners recognized that the boy was fighting for justice, not causing unnecessary trouble. Frustrated, Attorney Morgan decided to take a more personal approach. He went directly to Ethan. He showed up at the Parker family's home on a Saturday afternoon. "Good afternoon. I'm Attorney Richard Morgan. I'd like to speak with Ethan." Sarah recognized the name of the lawyer who had opposed Ethan in the first case. "You're that attorney?" "Yes, ma'am, but I come in peace. I just want to talk to the boy." Ethan appeared, curious. "Good afternoon, Attorney Morgan." "Ethan, may I have a private word with you?" Ethan glanced at his mother, who nodded nervously. They sat on the small porch. "Ethan, I'll be direct with you. You're causing a lot of trouble for many important people in this city." "How so, sir?" "Your activities are hurting lawyers, business owners, influential people. This could have consequences for you and your family." Ethan looked straight into Attorney Morgan's eyes. "Are you threatening me?" "No, son. I'm warning you. It would be better for everyone if you stopped these activities and went back to being a normal kid." Ethan stayed silent for a moment before answering. "Attorney Morgan, you've been a lawyer for a long time, haven't you?" "Yes, 25 years. And in those 25 years, how many poor people have you helped for free, attorney?" Morgan was taken aback by the direct question. "Well, that's beside the point." "No, it isn't, sir. You studied law, you have knowledge, you have experience. But you use all of that just to make money defending rich people. I'm 8 years old, and I've already helped more poor people than you have in your entire career." Ethan's response hit Attorney Morgan like a punch to the gut. The boy had gone straight to the heart of his hypocrisy. "Kid, you don't understand how the world works." "I do, sir. I understand there are people like you who use knowledge just to benefit themselves, and people like me who use knowledge to help those in need. And I know which side I want to be on." Ethan stood up. "Excuse me, Attorney Morgan. I have to study so I can help more people next week. Attorney Morgan left Ethan's house deeply shaken. The boy had laid bare his motivations clearly and undeniably. That night, Attorney Morgan looked at himself in the mirror and didn't like what he saw. A 50-year-old man, financially successful but morally inferior to an 8-year-old child. For the first time since meeting Ethan, Attorney Morgan began questioning his own actions and motivations. Ethan, in turn, spoke to Sarah about the encounter. "Mum, I think Attorney Morgan won't try to hurt us anymore." "Why do you think that, son?" "Because I think he understood something important today." "What?" "That we're not his enemy. His enemy is himself." Ethan was right. Attorney Morgan spent the following week deeply reflecting on his career and choices. He realized he had become exactly the kind of lawyer he criticized in his youth, someone who served only the powerful and ignored those in need. The following Friday, Attorney Morgan made a decision that would surprise everyone. He sought out Attorney Henry. "Henry, I'd like to talk to you about a possible collaboration." "Collaboration? Robert, are you feeling all right?" "I'm great. In fact, I'm starting to see things differently. I'd like to join the pro bono project you run with Ethan." Attorney Henry was skeptical. "Robert, you spent months trying to hurt Ethan. Why the sudden change?" "Because the boy made me see that I've become everything I swore I'd never be when I graduated. I want to redeem my career by doing something useful for society." Attorney Henry decided to give Attorney Morgan a chance, but cautiously, "All right, Robert, but it'll be a trial period. Any attempt to undermine the project will result in immediate removal." Attorney Morgan agreed to the terms. When Ethan learned Attorney Morgan wanted to join the project, his reaction was surprising. "Attorney Henry, I think we should give him a chance. Ethan, this man tried to hurt you multiple times. It's not wise to trust him." "Attorney Henry, if we don't give people chances to change, how will they ever change?" Maybe Attorney Morgan is serious this time. Ethan's maturity once again impressed Attorney Henry. The boy was willing to forgive and offer a second chance to someone who had tried to harm him. Attorney Morgan began participating in the project in a limited capacity, handling less complex cases under Attorney Henry's supervision. His first case was helping Mrs. Marlene, a 60-year-old woman being scammed by a cable company. Attorney Morgan resolved the case quickly and without charge. When Mrs. Marlene tried to give him a basket of fruit as thanks, he accepted it, moved. "Ethan," Attorney Morgan said afterward, "now I understand why you do this. The satisfaction of helping someone is far greater than any fee." "It's true, Attorney Morgan. And the best part is, the more we help, the more people come forward needing help. It's like justice multiplies." Attorney Morgan was genuinely transforming. He began dedicating more time to social work and less to lucrative cases. His old corporate clients weren't pleased. "Robert, are you abandoning our interest to become a social worker?" "I'm redefining my priorities," he replied. "You can hire other lawyers. People in need don't have that option." Within months, Attorney Morgan had become one of the project's key contributors. He worked in harmony with Ethan, respecting the boy's opinions and learning from his unique perspective. Ethan watched Attorney Morgan's transformation with satisfaction. "Attorney Stewart, I think this is our most important victory yet." "Why, Ethan?" "Because we didn't just help people with legal problems. We helped Attorney Morgan find the true purpose of the law." Attorney Stewart smiled. "Ethan, you have a wisdom that goes far beyond law books. You understand that changing lives is more important than winning cases." The Justice for All project had become a benchmark in Boston. They were now assisting over 50 families each month, always free of charge, always prioritizing those most in need. Ethan, at just 9 years old, had created a movement that transformed not only the lives of those they helped, but also the professionals involved. His reputation had spread to other cities. Delegations of lawyers came to learn about the project and replicate it in their own regions. But Ethan always kept his feet on the ground. "What matters isn't fame," he'd say in interviews. "What matters is helping those in need. Fame fades, but the good we do lasts forever." By age 10, Ethan had become a symbol of how legal knowledge could be used to promote social justice and equality. His story inspired similar programs at various universities, where law students provided free consultations to underserved communities under faculty supervision. Ethan participated in academic seminars, always emphasizing that the law only fulfills its purpose when it serves the most vulnerable. At one such event at Harvard University, a professor asked him, "Ethan, what's your greatest ambition for the future?" "Professor, I want justice to one day be a right for everyone, not a privilege for those with money. And I want lawyers to remember they studied law to serve society, not to exploit it." His answer drew long applause from the auditorium packed with students and professors. Sarah watched her son with pride and concern, pride for the man he was becoming, and concern for the weight of responsibility on his young shoulders. "Ethan," she said in a private conversation, "sometimes I wonder if you're growing up too fast. Mom, I didn't choose to be different, but since I am, I want to use that difference to do something good in the world. And you are, my son. You really are." Grandma Rose, now 82, gave her grandson her blessing daily. "My dear, boy, you were born to be special. Keep helping others and never lose your humility. Don't worry, Grandma, I'll never forget where I came from." The Justice for All project continued to grow. They rented a small office downtown, serving as a model legal clinic for low-income communities. Ethan spent 3 afternoons a week there, always accompanied by Attorney Henry, Attorney Morgan, or Attorney Stewart. He didn't handle cases alone, but his presence gave hope and confidence to those seeking help. One memorable case was that of Mr. Johnson, a farm worker injured on the job who was being misled by his employer about his rights. "Young Ethan," Mr. Johnson said, nearly in tears, "they say the accident was my fault, that I'll get nothing." Ethan reviewed the documents and was outraged. "Mr. Johnson, that's a lie. You're entitled to workers' compensation, medical care, and damages. The company is required to provide safety equipment, and from what I see here, they didn't." Attorney Morgan, who was assisting with the case, confirmed Ethan's analysis. "Johnson, we'll file a labor claim against the company. Your rights are protected by law." Mr. Johnson's case was successful. He received all the benefits he was owed, plus compensation for emotional distress. "Young Ethan," Mr. Johnson said when it was all resolved, "how can I ever thank you for what you've done for me? Mr. Johnson, you can help others facing the same struggle. Share your story, guide those in need. That's how the chain of good keeps going." This philosophy of multiplying kindness had become a hallmark of the project. Helped individuals became multipliers of knowledge in their communities. Ethan had created something greater than a simple social project. He had started a movement raising awareness about rights and justice. At 11 years old, Ethan received an invitation that would mark a new phase in his life: to participate in a special program at Harvard University in the United States for gifted youth. "Ethan," explained Attorney Stewart, "this is a unique opportunity. You'd spend 6 months studying with the best law professors in the world." Ethan listened with interest, but asked a question that surprised everyone. "What about the project here? The people who depend on our help?" The project would continue with Attorney Henry and Attorney Morgan. It would just be a short time for you to improve yourself. Ethan reflected for several days before giving his answer. He spoke with Sarah, Grandma Rose, and the people he regularly helped. "Attorney Stewart," he finally said, "I'm very grateful for the opportunity, but I can't accept." "Why, Ethan?" "Because my place is here, helping my community. Harvard can teach me theory, but it's here that I learn how to apply the law to change people's lives." Ethan's decision sparked heated debates. Many thought he was missing a once-in-a-lifetime chance for academic growth, but Ethan was firm in his choice. "It's no use learning everything about international law if I can't solve Mrs. Brown's problems down the street." His decision only strengthened his bond with the community and his reputation as someone who never forgot his roots. By 12, Ethan had become the most respected young lawyer in the country. Delegations came from other states to learn from his work. He participated in national legal conferences, always as a special guest, always sharing his message of social justice. At one such conference in Washington, D.C., Ethan met Justice Calvin Oliver of the Supreme Court. "Ethan," the justice said, "I've followed your work for years. You understand justice in a way many judges take decades to grasp. Thank you, Justice Oliver. I think justice isn't complicated. It's either right or wrong. The hard part is having the courage to do what's right. And do you have that courage? Yes, sir, because I've learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is doing what's right even when you're afraid. The justice was impressed by the maturity of his answer. Ethan, when you graduate from law school, I'd like you to consider applying for the judiciary. This country needs judges with your vision of justice. I'll think about it, Justice Oliver. But I still have much to learn and many people to help before then. The meeting with the justice made headlines, further increasing Ethan's fame. But fame was never his goal. At 13, Ethan remained the same humble boy who had started by helping his own mother in court. He still lived in the same modest house, still attended the special school for gifted students, and still spent afternoons at the project assisting those in need. His routine was strict: mornings at school, afternoons at the project, evenings studying with Attorney Stewart. Weekends were reserved for family and just being a kid. Because despite all his intellectual maturity, Ethan was still a child who loved playing soccer, watching cartoons and playing with his cousins. Sarah always made sure her son kept that balance. Ethan, knowledge is important, but so is happiness. Never forget to be happy. I am happy, Mom. I'm happy when I help people, when I study, when I play ball. I have a full life. And he truly did. Ethan had achieved something rare, balancing exceptional talent with social purpose, fame with humility, and intellectual maturity with childlike joy. At 14 years old, Ethan faced his biggest challenge yet, a case that would test not only his legal knowledge, but also his personal courage. The case came to him through Marina, a 15-year-old girl who had been his classmate at his old school. "Ethan," Marina said, clearly nervous, "I need your help, but it's something really serious. You can tell me, Marina. You know you can trust me." Marina revealed she was being sexually abused by her stepfather. She had tried to tell her mother but wasn't believed. "He said if I told anyone he'd hurt my mum," Marina explained, crying. "I don't know what to do anymore." Ethan was deeply shaken by Marina's story. It was the most serious and delicate case he had ever faced. "Marina, you were very brave to tell me this. Now we'll handle it together." Ethan knew this case required much more than legal knowledge. It needed sensitivity, strategy, and specialized psychological support. He immediately spoke with Attorney Henry. "Attorney Henry, we have a very serious case. I need your help." Attorney Henry listened to the account and agreed they needed to act fast. "Ethan will take this step by step. First, Marina needs psychological support. Then we'll guide her on how to safely file a report." They referred Marina to psychologist Mrs. Fletcher, a specialist in abuse cases. Meanwhile, they planned the legal strategy. "Marina," Ethan explained, "you'll have to be very brave, but we'll be with you every step of the way." The first step was filing a formal report at the Special Victims Unit. Ethan accompanied Marina, along with Attorney Henry and Mrs. Fletcher. Detective Patricia Sanders took the report seriously. "Marina, I know this is hard, but I need you to tell me everything in detail." Ethan stayed by Marina's side throughout the entire statement, offering emotional support and guidance about her rights. When Marina finished telling her story, the detective turned to Ethan. "Young man, you're not a registered attorney. You can't officially assist with this case." "Detective," Ethan replied respectfully, "I'm not here as an attorney. I'm here as Marina's friend, giving her emotional support. Attorney Henry will represent her legally." The detective accepted. Ethan's presence, recognizing his support, was important for Marina. The case grew more complicated when Marina's stepfather, Mr. Charles, hired an experienced lawyer and began pressuring the family to drop the charges. "He's threatening my mom," Marina told Ethan. "He said he'll evict her, make her lose her job." Ethan was outraged. "Marina, that just proves he's guilty. Innocent people don't threaten witnesses." Attorney Henry filed for a protective order for Marina and her mother. The judge granted it, ruling that Mr. Charles couldn't come near them, but the pressure continued indirectly. Mr. Charles's relatives approached Marina's mother, trying to convince her to drop the charges. "Ethan," Marina said desperately, "my mom is thinking of sending me to my aunt's house in another city. She thinks it's better for me to disappear than to keep going with this case." Ethan spoke with Marina's mother, Mrs. Helen. "Mrs. Helen, I understand this is difficult, but sending Marina away won't solve the problem. It'll only protect the abuser. Young man, you don't understand. This man can do real harm to us. He has money, connections. Mrs. Helen, the law exists to protect people like you and Marina from people like him. If we give up now, he'll keep doing this, maybe to other children." The conversation was long and emotional. Ethan used all his persuasion to convince Mrs. Helen to support her daughter. "Think of it this way, Mrs. Helen. If it were another mother in your situation, wouldn't you want her to protect her daughter? Marina needs you now." Mrs. Helen finally agreed to support her daughter and keep the complaint. The trial was scheduled for 3 months later. During that time, Ethan accompanied Marina through every step of the process, always providing psychological support and legal guidance. "Marina," Ethan would say, "remember, you're the victim, not the guilty one. You're doing the right thing." On the day of the trial, the courtroom was packed. The case had gained media attention as the case of the young lawyer against the abuser. Ethan stood by Marina in court, wearing his best suit. He knew this was a crucial moment, not just for Marina, but for all children who were victims of abuse. During the trial, Ethan couldn't speak officially, but his presence gave Marina the strength and courage to testify clearly and firmly. Mr. Charles's lawyer tried to discredit Marina's testimony, arguing she was being manipulated. "Your Honor, the minor is clearly being influenced by people who want to harm my client." Attorney Henry countered, "Your Honor, Marina received proper psychological and legal support. That's not manipulation. It's protection for a vulnerable victim." The district attorney, Matthew Andrews, presented the evidence gathered during the investigation. There were testimonies from neighbors confirming Mr. Charles's suspicious behavior, psychological reports validating Marina's account, and physical evidence supporting her version. Ethan watched everything carefully, silently praying for justice to be served. He knew this case meant much more than punishing one criminal. It meant protecting all children who were victims of abuse. During the recess, Marina approached Ethan. "Ethan, I'm scared he'll be released and come after me. Marina, even if that happens, you won't be alone. We have protective measures, legal support, and a whole network of people who care about you." When the trial resumed, something unexpected happened. Mr. Charles, seeing the overwhelming evidence against him, decided to confess in exchange for a lighter sentence. "Your Honor," Mr. Charles's lawyer said, "my client would like to enter a plea bargain." Judge Mark Peterson examined the proposal. "Does the defendant fully confess to the crimes he's accused of?" "Yes, Your Honor, and he's willing to undergo psychological treatment." Marina began to cry, but this time they were tears of relief. Ethan held her hand. "It's over, Marina, you were so brave." Mr. Charles was sentenced to 8 years in prison, in addition to paying compensation to Marina and undergoing mandatory psychological treatment. After the trial, several reporters wanted to interview Ethan. "Ethan, how do you feel about this victory?" "I feel relieved because Marina can now rebuild her life, but sad because there are thousands of children going through the same thing she did." "What do you think can be done to better protect children?" "Education. Children need to know they have rights, that they should report when someone does something wrong to them, and that there will always be adults willing to protect them." The case had a huge impact. Ethan received hundreds of letters from children sharing similar situations and asking for help. Sarah grew concerned about the overwhelming demand. "Ethan, my son, you're taking on responsibilities even adults can't handle. Mom, I can't ignore someone who needs help. If I have the knowledge to help, I have an obligation to use it." Attorney Stewart suggested a solution. "Ethan, how about we create a training program? Could you teach other young people to identify and guide cases of child abuse?" The idea pleased Ethan. "That way I could multiply the help. Instead of handling one case at a time, I can train people to handle multiple cases simultaneously." And so, the Guardians Project was born. where Ethan trained teenagers and young adults to identify cases of child abuse and guide victims on what to do. The first group of guardians consisted of 15 young people between 16 and 20 years old. Ethan, now 15 himself, conducted the training sessions with the seriousness of an experienced teacher. The most important thing, Ethan explained to the guardians, is to listen without judging. The child needs to feel safe to share what's happening. What if the child is lying? Asked Anna Caroline, one of the participants. Children rarely lie about abuse. Statistically, less than 2% of reports are false. It's always better to believe and investigate than to doubt and leave a child unprotected. Ethan taught not only the legal aspects, but also the psychological and social dimensions of abuse cases. You need to understand that abusers are often people close to the family. That makes the situation more complex because the child may love the abuser while suffering from the abuse. The training lasted 3 months and included theoretical lessons, practical simulations, and supervised fieldwork. By the end, each guardian was prepared to handle basic cases and refer complex ones to specialized professionals. The first case handled by a guardian was emotional for Ethan. Julia, 18, recognized signs of abuse in her 7-year-old cousin and managed to guide the family on what to do. Ethan, Julia said, I did it. The boy is safe now and the abuser was reported. Julia, you saved a child. That's the most important thing anyone can do in life. The Guardians project grew quickly. Within 6 months, there were 50 active guardians in the city, handling an average of 20 cases per month. Ethan monitored all complex cases, but now had a support network that greatly expanded his ability to help vulnerable children. Attorney Morgan, who had become one of the project's main collaborators, watched Ethan's progress with admiration. Ethan, you've created something far beyond what I ever imagined possible. Attorney Morgan, you're the one who taught me an important lesson. Me? What lesson? That people can change. If you could change, that means others can too. That gives me hope. Attorney Morgan smiled, moved. His transformation had become one of Ethan's greatest personal victories, but not everything was success. Ethan faced some painful failures that tested his resolve. The hardest case was Peter, a 9-year-old boy being abused by his grandfather. When Ethan and the guardians tried to intervene, the family shut them out and moved away, taking Peter with them. Ethan, said Attorney Henry, you did everything you could. Sometimes we can't save everyone. But Attorney Henry, Peter is still suffering. How can I accept that? Because you're human, Ethan. You're not a superhero. You can help many people, but you can't save everyone. The frustration over Peter's case led Ethan to an existential crisis. He even questioned whether he should continue his projects. Mom, he said one night, visibly worn down, sometimes I wonder if I'm making a real difference or just fooling myself. Sarah sat beside her son. Ethan, think of all the people you've already helped. Marina, Mrs. Wilson, Patricia, Mrs. Sebastian, and so many others. Each of them has a better life because of you. But what about those I couldn't help? Son, you can't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. You can do your part, and your part is already much greater than anyone else I know. Grandma Rose also gave her opinion. My dear grandson, even Jesus couldn't save everyone. What matters is trying, is never giving up on doing good. The family's words helped Ethan overcome the crisis. He understood he couldn't be responsible for all the suffering in the world, but he could keep doing his part. At 16, Ethan took the entrance exam for Harvard University's law school. His score was the highest in the program's history. Ethan, said the dean, Dr. Peter Mendenhall, it's an honor to have you as a student at our university. Thank you, sir. I hope to learn a lot here so I can help even more people. Ethan began college while maintaining all his social projects. His routine became even more intense. Mornings at school, afternoons on projects, nights studying. But he didn't mind. On the contrary, he was excited to learn more about law and expand his ability to help others. At Harvard, Ethan stood out immediately. Professors were impressed by his practical knowledge and his ability to connect theory with real-world application. Ethan, said Professor Andrew Oliver, You have an understanding of law that we usually only see in professionals with decades of experience. Professor, I was lucky enough to learn law by practicing, not just studying theory. That makes a difference. Ethan was also well received by his classmates, despite the age difference. At 16, he was the youngest, but his maturity and humility earned everyone's respect. Ethan, said Carla, a classmate, you could teach us about practical law. All we see here is theory. Carla's suggestion sparked another project. Ethan began holding monthly seminars where he shared his practical experiences with his peers. The seminars became famous at Harvard. Students from all years attended to hear Ethan discuss real cases and explain how to apply theory in practice. What you're learning here is fundamental, Ethan would say in the seminars. But always remember, law exists to improve people's lives, not to make lawyers rich. Even professors started attending Ethan's seminars. It was an unprecedented situation. A first-year student teaching practical concepts to PhDs. Ethan, remarked Professor Marcia Sanders, your seminars are changing how I teach my subject. You constantly remind us of the social purpose of law. Ethan was moved by the comment, Professor, if I can help train more socially conscious lawyers, I'm very happy. During his second year, Ethan faced a new challenge. A group of older students, led by Franklin Campbell, began campaigning against his projects. Ethan is using the university to promote himself, Franklin told anyone who would listen. He should focus on studying instead of playing famous lawyer. Franklin's campaign was driven by envy. He was in his 5th year but couldn't get the same attention and recognition Ethan received. Franklin, Carla argued, Ethan is doing important things for society. Why do you want to interfere? Because a student's place is studying, not showing off in the media, Franklin snapped. Franklin convinced some classmates to support him. They began spreading rumors that Ethan was profiting from his projects and using the university for commercial purposes. The rumors reached the administration. The dean, Dr. Charles Magnuson, called Ethan in for a talk. "Science, Ethan, I've been receiving some complaints about your extracurricular activities. Some students think you're improperly using the university's name." Ethan was surprised and hurt. "Dr. Charles, I never use the university's name for anything. I always make it clear that my projects are independent and volunteer-based." "I know that, Ethan, but I need to look into these claims to avoid issues with the university board." Dr. Charles appointed a committee to investigate Ethan's activities. The committee consisted of 3 professors tasked with checking for any irregularities. Ethan felt wronged but fully cooperated with the investigation. "You can check everything," he told the committee. "I've never charged anyone, never misused the university's name, and never neglected my studies." The investigation lasted a month. The committee reviewed the finances of Ethan's projects, spoke with people he had helped, and analyzed his academic performance. The final report was clear. Ethan Parker carries out exemplary social work, always adhering to ethical and legal principles. There are no irregularities in his actions. On the contrary, his activities bring positive recognition to the university. Dr. Charles called Ethan to share the results. "Ethan, as expected, the investigation found no wrongdoing. I apologize for the inconvenience." "No need to apologize, Dr. Charles. I understand you had to verify. What saddens me is that fellow students tried to harm me out of jealousy. Ethan, unfortunately, that's part of life. When someone stands out by doing good, there will always be those who try to undermine it." "But why, Dr. Charles? I don't understand why anyone would want to stop someone from helping others." "Because your success makes others feel inadequate. Instead of being inspired by you, they'd rather tear you down." Ironically, the investigation strengthened Ethan's position at the university. Professors and students who hadn't known much about his work were impressed by the detailed report on his projects. Franklin Campbell became isolated and transferred to another university the following semester. His few followers apologized to Ethan. "Ethan," said Richard, one of those who had supported Franklin, "I let jealousy cloud my judgment. I'm sorry. Your work is truly inspiring." Ethan accepted the apologies gracefully. "Richard, we all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them and moving forward." The episode taught Ethan an important lesson about handling envy and opposition. He realized that the more successful he became, the more criticism and attacks he would face. "Attorney Stewart," Ethan said during one of his mentoring sessions, "sometimes it's hard to understand why some people want to harm me when I'm just trying to help others." "Ethan, this happens to anyone who stands out by doing good. Jesus was crucified, Gandhi was assassinated, Martin Luther King was killed. Doing good unsettles those who do harm. So what should I do? Keep doing good. Don't let others' malice turn you bitter. Use their opposition as fuel to do even more good." Attorney Stewart's advice was crucial in helping Ethan develop emotional resilience. He learned not to take attacks personally and to use criticism as motivation to improve. In his third year, Ethan faced his biggest academic challenge yet. Professor Joseph Silver, known for his strictness and dislike of standout students, decided to put Ethan in his place. "Mr. Parker," Professor Silver said on the first day of class, "I hope you don't mistake fame for legal knowledge. In my course, only what's in the books counts." Ethan immediately realized the professor had something against him, but decided to keep his head down and focus on his studies. Professor Joseph began subtly targeting Ethan. He would ask him extremely difficult questions, give him unfairly low grades on exams, and criticize his class participation. "Mr. Parker," the professor said after Ethan correctly answered a complex question, "your answer is technically correct but lacks theoretical depth." Ethan's classmates noticed the unfair treatment. "Ethan," Carla said, "Professor Joseph is being unfair to you. Everyone can see it." "I know, Carla, but I'll keep doing my best. In the end, what matters is learning." Ethan decided to study even harder for Professor Joseph's class. He wanted to make sure his low grades couldn't be justified by a lack of knowledge. The situation reached a breaking point when Professor Joseph failed Ethan on the first exam of the semester, giving him a 4.5 when he clearly deserved at least an 8.0. "Professor Joseph," Ethan said after class, "could we discuss my exam?" "Of course, Mr. Parker. What's your concern?" "Sir, I reviewed my exam and couldn't find any mistakes that would justify the grade I received." "Mr. Parker, grades are not up for debate. If you're unsatisfied, you can file a formal appeal." Ethan knew appealing would only give Professor Joseph more reason to target him. He decided on a different approach. He went to Professor Andrew Oliver, who had a good relationship with Professor Joseph. "Professor Andrew, I need your help with a delicate situation." Ethan explained the situation without directly accusing Professor Joseph. "I'm struggling in Professor Joseph's class and would like to improve my performance. Could you give me some advice?" Professor Andrew, aware of Professor Joseph's reputation for excessive strictness, understood what was happening. "Ethan, I'll talk to Joseph informally about grading methods. Maybe I can help." The conversation between Professor Andrew and Professor Joseph was revealing. "Joseph, some students have mentioned you've been unusually harsh this semester." "Andrew, that famous kid needs to learn he's just another student here." "Joseph, that's unprofessional." "Ethan is an excellent student. Every professor recognizes that. He's too full of himself because of all that attention." Professor Andrew realized Professor Joseph was acting out of personal bias, not academic standards. "Joseph, you're letting your personal feelings interfere with your duty as an educator. This could have serious consequences." The conversation made Professor Joseph reconsider. He knew Professor Andrew was right, and that his targeting of Ethan could cause problems if the administration found out. In the next class, Professor Joseph completely changed his attitude toward Ethan, treating him with the same fairness as the other students. On the second exam, Ethan earned a perfect score, and Professor Joseph publicly acknowledged it. "Mr. Parker, excellent work. Congratulations on your performance." Ethan thanked him politely, showing neither resentment nor satisfaction at the professor's change in behavior. After class, Professor Joseph asked to speak with Ethan privately. "Mr. Parker, I need to ask something of you." "Yes, Professor? I want to apologize for my behavior earlier in the semester. I was unfair to you for personal reasons." Ethan was surprised by the professor's honesty. "Professor, we all make mistakes. What matters is recognizing and correcting them." You're very mature for your age, Ethan. I hope you stay that way. The incident with Professor Joseph taught Ethan another valuable lesson. Sometimes, the best way to handle opposition is through patience and diplomacy, not direct confrontation. In his 4th year of college, Ethan began thinking about his professional future. He received daily offers from major law firms eager to hire him as soon as he graduated. "Ethan," said attorney Richard Ferguson, partner at one of the largest firms in the country, "we're offering a starting salary of $20,000 a month plus performance bonuses." It was a tempting offer, especially considering the financial struggles his family had faced over the years. Sarah continued working as a cleaner, despite all the recognition Ethan had achieved. "Attorney Ferguson, I appreciate the offer, but I need to think about my professional goals." "Ethan, you won't find a better proposal anywhere. We're offering a 5-year contract with excellent terms." Ethan discussed the offers with Attorney Stewart. "Attorney Stewart, all the firms are offering a lot of money, but none want me to continue with the social projects." "And what do you want to do?" "Ethan, I want to keep helping those in need. Money is important, but it's not the most important thing." "Then maybe it's time for you to consider starting your own firm." Attorney Stewart's suggestion made Ethan reflect. Having his own firm would give him the freedom to continue social projects while also earning from paid cases. "But Attorney Stewart, I don't have the money to start a firm." "Ethan, I have a proposal for you. How about we become partners? I'll invest in the structure, and you bring the expertise and dedication." Attorney Stewart's proposal was perfect. He offered experience and startup capital. Ethan brought energy and a social vision. It would be a balanced partnership. "Attorney Stewart, I accept your offer, but on one condition. Half the cases must be pro bono for those in need." "Agreed, Ethan. In fact, that only enhances our firm's value." And so, Stewart and Parker Law Partners was born. Even before Ethan graduated, they were already planning the new business. The firm would be unlike any other, with a full wing dedicated to free services, professionals specializing in different areas of social law, and partnerships with universities for supervised internships. "Ethan," said Attorney Henry when he learned of the plan, "you're creating a revolutionary model for legal practice." "Attorney Henry, we want to prove it's possible to be profitable and socially responsible at the same time." Ethan's final year of school was spent preparing the new firm. He graduated with top honors and recognition from all his professors. At the ceremony, he was chosen as class speaker. His speech moved everyone present. "Dear colleagues, today we become attorneys. But being an attorney is far more than holding a degree. It's about the responsibility to use our knowledge to build a fairer society. Some of you will work for big corporations, others for small firms. No matter where you go, always remember, the law exists to serve people, not the other way around. I promise to dedicate my career to fighting for the vulnerable, for those without a voice, for those who need justice but can't afford it." The speech received a standing ovation for over 5 minutes. Many classmates approached Ethan afterward. "Ethan," said Carla, now also a graduate, "your speech inspired me. I want to work with you at the new firm." "Carla, it'd be an honor to have you on the team." Stewart and Parker opened its doors 6 months after Ethan's graduation. The launch was a landmark event, attended by officials, university peers, and, most importantly, people Ethan had helped over the years. "Joyce, Mrs. Wilson, Mr. Wilson, Patricia, Marina, all these people here today are the reason this firm exists," said Ethan in his opening speech. The firm was an immediate success. In the first 6 months, they handled over 200 pro bono cases and another 100 paid ones. The combination of technical excellence and social commitment attracted clients from across the state. Ethan, now 22, had fulfilled his childhood dream, using the law to help people in need of justice. Sarah watched her son with immense pride. "Ethan, when you were little and talked about helping people, I thought it was just child's play. I never imagined you'd come this far." "Mum, I got here because you taught me to have compassion for others and never give up fighting for what's right." Grandma Rose, now 85, gave her daily blessing to her grandson. "My dear boy, always stay this way. God gave you this gift to do good in the world. Don't worry, Grandma. I'll never forget where I came from or why I started doing this." Attorney Morgan, who had become one of the firm's leading partners, reflected on his transformation. "Ethan, you completely changed my life. Today, I'm a much better lawyer, and more importantly, a much better person." "Attorney Morgan, you were the one who chose to change. I just showed you it was possible." The firm continued to grow. Within 2 years, they had a team of 15 lawyers, all committed to the principles of social justice established by Ethan. They created specialized departments in labor law, consumer rights, family law, and social security law. Each department handled both paid and pro bono cases. "Attorney Stewart," Ethan said during a review of their first 2 years, "we've proven it's possible to run a profitable firm while staying socially responsible. Ethan, you've created a model being replicated by firms across the country. This is a revolution in American law." Ethan's revolution in legal practice didn't go unnoticed by professional associations. He was invited to speak at national legal conferences, always delivering his message of social responsibility. In a memorable speech at the National Bar Association conference, Ethan said, "Dear colleagues, we lawyers are the guardians of justice, but justice can't be a privilege for those with money. Our duty is to ensure everyone has access to their rights. I know many argue we need to earn a living, pay bills, support families, and I fully agree, but we can do that while still dedicating part of our time to those who can't pay. Imagine if every lawyer in the US devoted just 20% of their time to pro bono work. We'd eliminate the lack of access to justice in this country." The speech had a massive impact. Several bar association chapters created programs inspired by Ethan's words, encouraging lawyers to dedicate a percentage of their time to pro bono service. Ethan had become a national reference for social advocacy. By 25, he was regularly cited in law textbooks, academic articles, and reports on access to justice. But fame was never his goal. Ethan still personally handled complex cases, especially those involving vulnerable children and teens. One case that deeply affected Ethan was that of John Peter, a 10-year-old boy living on the streets who was constantly harassed by police officers, treating him like a criminal. "Attorney Ethan," said social worker Mary Sanders, "this boy needs urgent help. He has no family, survives on handouts, and is being criminalized just for being homeless." Ethan met John Peter at a temporary shelter. "Hi, John Peter, I'm Ethan. I heard you've been going through some tough times." "Uncle, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just trying to survive." "I know, John Peter, and I'm going to help you find a better solution." Ethan discovered that John Peter had run away from a shelter where he suffered mistreatment. He had been living on the streets for 3 months, sleeping under awnings and eating scraps of food. "John Peter, we're going to solve your situation for good. You deserve a safe home and the chance to go to school." Ethan filed a lawsuit against the shelter that had mistreated John Peter and managed to enroll him in an adoption program for older children. It took 6 months of legal proceedings, but finally John Peter was adopted by a loving family that gave him the opportunity to rebuild his life. "Attorney Parker," John Peter said during the adoption hearing, "thank you for not giving up on me. John Peter, I'm the one who should thank you for letting me help you. Now study hard and be happy." Cases like John Peter's reaffirmed for Ethan why he had chosen law. It wasn't for money or recognition, but for the chance to change lives. At 28, Ethan received an invitation that deeply moved him: to be appointed as the head of the Department of Human Rights for the city of Boston. "Ethan," said Mayor Anthony Silver, "we want you to lead our human rights policies. Your experience and credibility are exactly what we need." Ethan was tempted by the opportunity to influence public policy on a citywide scale, but had reservations. "Mr. Mayor, I appreciate your trust, but I don't want to abandon my direct work with people." "Ethan, as secretary, you could help thousands through public policies, not just those who come to your office." Ethan discussed the offer with his family and mentors. "Attorney Stewart, what do you think? Should I accept?" "Ethan, this is a unique chance to expand your impact. As secretary, you can create programs that benefit the entire city. Sarah also supported the decision. Son, you've always wanted to help as many people as possible. As secretary, you can do that on a much larger scale. After much reflection, Ethan accepted the offer, but with conditions. Mr. Mayor, I'll accept the position, but I want to keep some of my office work, especially cases involving vulnerable children. Perfect, Ethan. You can organize your schedule however you prefer. Ethan's appointment as head of the Department of Human Rights was well received by the public. He was seen as someone who truly understood the struggles of the most vulnerable. On his first day as secretary, Ethan gathered his entire team. Everyone, our work here isn't about bureaucracy. It's about changing lives. Every case we review, every policy we create, must aim to protect those who need it most. Ethan implemented several innovations in the department. He created mobile assistance units that brought human rights services to underserved neighborhoods, established partnerships with universities for legal aid internships, and set up an online reporting system for rights violations. Attorney Parker, said Patricia Oliver, the social services coordinator, I've never seen a secretary so connected to the people. You truly understand their reality. Patricia, I come from that reality. I've never forgotten where I came from or what people's real struggles are. One of Ethan's most successful programs was the Junior Defenders, where children and teens were trained to know their rights and help other vulnerable kids. You'll be multipliers of knowledge, Ethan explained to the Junior Defenders. Groups. You'll teach other kids about their rights, how to protect themselves, and how to seek help. The program was so successful that within a year, there were 500 junior defenders spread across the city, each responsible for guiding other children in their communities. Ethan also created the Justice in School program, where volunteer attorneys taught public school students about basic rights. Children need to know they have rights, Ethan would say. Knowledge is the best protection against abuse and injustice. After 2 years as secretary, Ethan had completely transformed the city's human rights structure. Boston had become a national model for policies protecting vulnerable groups, but Ethan felt his true calling was in direct service to people. He decided not to renew his term as secretary and return fully to the firm. Ethan, the mayor said, when he announced his decision, are you sure? You could have great political opportunities in the future. Mr. Mayor, politics was never my goal. My goal has always been to help people, and I can do that best at the firm. Ethan returned to Stewart & Parker Law Partners with renewed energy. His experience as secretary had given him a broader perspective on social issues and possible solutions. Attorney Stewart, Ethan said, now I know exactly what I want to do for the rest of my career. What's that, Ethan? I want to create a legal practice model that can be replicated across the country. I want to prove it's possible to combine professional success with social responsibility. And Ethan got to work. He systematized all the firm's experiences, created best practice manuals, and developed a social franchising program for other attorneys. The idea, Ethan explained in lectures, is to create a national network of law firms committed to social justice. Each firm maintains its independence, but follows shared principles of social responsibility. The Social Justice Network project grew quickly. Within 2 years, there were affiliated firms in 15 states, all dedicating at least 30% of their time to pro bono cases. At 32, Ethan had sparked a national movement to transform the legal profession. He wasn't just a successful attorney, but a leader inspiring an entire generation of professionals. His story had become legendary in legal circles. The 8-year-old boy who corrected a judge in court had become the country's most respected attorney in matters of social justice. But for Ethan, recognition was never the priority. In an interview with a national magazine, he explained his philosophy. Recognition is a consequence, not a goal. My goal has always been to use what I know to help those in need. If that brought me recognition, I'm glad, but it wasn't what I sought. What motivates you most today? Knowing there are thousands of attorneys across the country inspired to dedicate part of their time to social work. That multiplies my impact infinitely. Ethan continued handling cases personally, especially those involving children. His experience since childhood had given him unique insight into complex cases. One of the most memorable cases of his career was Gabriella's, a 15-year-old girl who had been a victim of human trafficking and was trying to rebuild her life. "Attorney Ethan," Gabriella said at their first meeting, "everyone tells me I should forget what happened and move on. But I want justice. Gabriella, you have every right to seek justice, and we'll fight for it together." Gabriella's case was extremely complex, involving an international human trafficking ring. Ethan worked with national and international organizations to dismantle the network and ensure Gabriella received all the support she needed. It was 3 years of legal proceedings, but in the end, 17 people were convicted of human trafficking, and Gabriella received compensation that allowed her to restart her life with dignity. "Ethan," Gabriella said on the day the final verdict was delivered, "thank you for believing in me when no one else did. Gabriella, you're a warrior. Your courage will inspire others who've been through the same situation." Cases like Gabriella's reaffirmed for Ethan that he had chosen the right path. Every transformed life was worth more than any professional recognition. At 35, Ethan was considered the most influential human rights attorney in the country. He had received dozens of awards, written 3 books on social advocacy, and inspired an entire generation of professionals. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. But perhaps his greatest victory was personal. Despite all his success and recognition, Ethan had managed to stay humble and connected to ordinary people. He still lived in Boston, still visited the neighborhood where he grew up, and still personally assisted those in need who sought his help. "Ethan," said Sarah, now 70, "sometimes I wonder if you missed chances to get rich by insisting on helping the poor." "Mom, I am rich. Rich in purpose, rich in fulfillment, rich in knowing I've made a difference in thousands of lives. That kind of wealth is priceless." Grandma Rose, now 90, still blessed her grandson. "My dear, boy, you've done exactly what I always knew you would. Used your gifts to help others. I'm so proud of you." Attorney Stewart, retired but still Ethan's mentor, reflected on their journey together. "Ethan, when I first met you, you were just a brilliant kid. Now you're a leader who's transformed American law." Attorney Stewart, "I wouldn't be here without your guidance and support. You taught me that knowledge without purpose is empty." Attorney Morgan, completely transformed since his early clashes with Ethan, had become one of the country's leading advocates for social justice. "Ethan, you showed me it's never too late to change, to become a better person. That didn't just change my career, it changed my whole life." Attorney Morgan, your transformation is one of the things I'm proudest of in my entire journey. It proves people can change when they find purpose. Stewart and Parker Law Partners had become the largest social advocacy firm in the country, with offices in 10 cities and a team of over 100 professionals, all committed to the principles Ethan established. "Attorney Stewart," Ethan said at the firm's 15-year anniversary, "we've proven it's possible to build a thriving business based on ethics and social responsibility." "Ethan, you didn't just prove it, you created a model, being copied across Latin America." Indeed, Ethan's model had spread to other countries. Firms inspired by his philosophy operated in Chile, Argentina, Colombia, and Mexico. Ethan received constant invitations to speak internationally, but always declined. "My work is here in the United States, with the American people. I don't want to become an international speaker and lose touch with local realities." That decision reinforced his credibility as someone genuinely committed to social causes, not just personal fame. At 40, Ethan faced a tough choice. He'd been approached to run for political office, with support from multiple parties and social movements. "Ethan," said Charles Henry, leader of a social movement, "you have the credibility and knowledge to be a senator, governor, even president. You could make changes on a national scale. Charles, I appreciate the trust, but partisan politics isn't my calling. I prefer to keep working directly with people." "But Ethan, as a politician, you could change laws, create national public policies, And I'd also get caught up in power games, party commitments, disputes that would pull me away from real work. I'd rather influence politics through my work, not through positions. Ethan held firm in his decision not to engage in partisan politics. He preferred to shape public policy through his technical expertise and moral credibility. This stance gave him unique freedom. He could criticize or support governments based solely on technical and ethical grounds without partisan obligations. "Ethan has the freedom we politicians don't," commented Senator Paul Mitchell. "He can always speak the truth because he owes no favors." At 42, Ethan faced the biggest challenge of his career, a case that would test all his knowledge, courage, and determination. The case came to him through Anna Beatrice, an investigative journalist who had uncovered a corruption network involving local authorities and powerful business people. "Ethan," Anna Beatrice said in a confidential meeting, "I've found something very serious, but I need legal help to formalize the accusations." "What did you uncover, Anna?" "A corruption scheme diverting public funds meant for daycare centers and schools. Children are being harmed to enrich politicians and business people." Ethan was outraged by the report. It was exactly the kind of injustice he had fought against his entire life. "Anna, this is extremely serious. How many people are involved?" "From what I've found, 17 people, including 2 city council members, a municipal secretary, and 5 business people." Ethan carefully reviewed all the evidence Anna Beatrice had gathered. There were documents, recordings, photographs, and testimonies proving the corruption scheme. "Anna, this evidence is solid. We can file a complaint with the Department of Labor prosecution and launch a formal investigation." "Ethan, I have to warn you. These people are very powerful. They'll try to hurt you in every way possible." "Anna, if I do nothing, children will keep suffering. I can't accept that." Ethan prepared a detailed complaint for the Department of Labor prosecution, attaching all the evidence Anna Beatrice had collected. It was a document over 200 pages long, outlining the entire corruption scheme. The complaint was filed on a Monday. By Wednesday, Ethan began receiving anonymous threats. "Lawyer, stop meddling where you don't belong or you'll regret it." Ethan reported the threats to the police, but didn't back down. Instead, he intensified his investigations and started giving interviews about the case. "The children of Boston are being robbed," Ethan said in a televised interview. "Funds meant to build daycare centers and renovate schools are going into the bank accounts of corrupt individuals." The interview caused an uproar. The public was outraged by the revelations, and the Department of Labor prosecution faced pressure to act quickly. Within 2 weeks, a police operation arrested 7 people involved in the scheme. Ethan oversaw the operation as the victim's representative. "Attorney Parker," said District Attorney Charles Edward, "your evidence was crucial to the operation's success. Attorney Charles, what matters is that justice is served and these funds are returned to benefit children." But the initial victory soon turned into a new challenge. The defendants hired the best attorneys in the country and launched a campaign to discredit the evidence and attack Ethan's credibility. "Ethan is being used for political gain," declared Attorney August Ferris, the defendant's lawyer. "He's trying to advance his own career by attacking honest people." The attacks intensified when one of the businessmen involved, Mr. Richard Alvin, made Ethan an offer. "Attorney Parker, let's settle this civilly. I'm willing to donate $5 million to your firm if you drop the charges." "Mr. Alvin, this is attempted bribery. I'll report it immediately to the Department of Labor prosecution." "Don't be hasty, counselor. Think about your family, your career. Is this case worth risking everything?" Ethan not only rejected the offer, but also filed a formal complaint for attempted bribery, worsening Mr. Alvin's situation. The corrupt responded immediately and violently. They hired a firm specializing in smearing opponents and launched a defamation campaign against Ethan. Newspapers received dossiers with alleged misconduct from Ethan's firm. Social media was flooded with fake news about his personal life. Former clients were pressured to make negative statements about his work. "Ethan," said Attorney Stewart, concerned, "they're trying to destroy your reputation. Maybe it's best to step back strategically." "Attorney Stewart, if I back down now, I'm telling these corrupt individuals they can intimidate anyone. I can't do that. Ethan decided to confront the smear campaign head-on. He held a press conference presenting his entire professional history and challenging his accusers to prove any wrongdoing. They're trying to destroy me because they can't destroy the evidence against them, Ethan said at the conference. My life is an open book. I challenge anyone to prove I've acted improperly at any point in my career. The strategy worked. The press investigated the allegations against Ethan and found them all false. This strengthened his credibility and weakened the defense of the corrupt. The trial was scheduled for 6 months later. During that time, Ethan faced more threats, bribery attempts, and attacks on his reputation. Ethan, Sarah said worriedly, it's not worth risking so much. You've already done so much for society. Mum, if I give up now, all those children who had their schools and daycares stolen from them will never see justice. I can't accept that. The trial became one of the most closely watched in Boston's history. Ethan presented the evidence masterfully, showing how every stolen dollar represented lost opportunities for underprivileged children. Your Honors, Ethan said in his closing arguments, this isn't just a case of corruption. It's a case of stealing hope from thousands of children who deserved better schools and proper daycares. The defense tried to discredit Ethan, claiming he was motivated by personal ambition. Your Honors, Attorney Parker is using this case to boost his fame and business. Ethan requested a rebuttal. Your Honors, I've dedicated my entire life to fighting for social justice, often at financial cost. If I wanted fame and money, I would have accepted the many offers I've received over the years to work for big corporations. The trial lasted 3 days. In the end, all 17 defendants were convicted, and the embezzled funds were recovered, to be reinvested in early childhood education. Ethan, said Judge Frederick Silver after delivering the verdict, your work was essential in delivering justice. This country needs more professionals like you. The victory in the corruption case definitively cemented Ethan's reputation as the nation's leading advocate for social rights. He had faced powerful interests and emerged victorious, keeping his integrity intact. Attorney Parker, said Anna Beatrice, the journalist who broke the story, you've proven there are still people willing to fight for what's right, no matter the personal cost. Anna, this case proved that when honest people come together, they can overcome any corrupt system. After the win, Ethan received hundreds of requests for similar cases across the country. Lawyers and journalists sought his partnership to combat corruption in their cities. Ethan, said Attorney Henry, you've become the national symbol in the fight against corruption. Attorney Henry, I don't want to be a symbol of anything. I just want to keep doing my job, defending those who need justice. Ethan decided he would continue taking on corruption cases, but only those that directly harmed vulnerable people. He didn't want to become a politician hunter, but rather a defender of the weak. At 45, Ethan had achieved everything he dreamed of as a child, using his legal knowledge to protect those in need of justice. His firm was a national benchmark, his methodology was taught in universities, and his philosophy had inspired thousands of lawyers across the country. But perhaps his greatest achievement was personal. He had stayed true to his principles since he was 8 years old, when he corrected a judge in court to defend his mother. Attorney Stewart, Ethan said in a private conversation, sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I hadn't decided to help my mother that day in court. Ethan, you didn't decide to help your mother. You were simply being yourself, and you're still the same person, someone who can't stand injustice without acting. Do you think it was worth it? Ethan, look around you. Thousands of lives have been changed because of your work. Hundreds of lawyers have altered their practices because of your inspiration. An entire system of social advocacy was built on your philosophy. Of course it was worth it. Ethan smiled, satisfied. At 45, he knew he had fulfilled his life's mission, using his talents to make the world a little fairer. Sarah, now 75, watched her son with endless pride. Ethan, when you were little and talked about being a lawyer to help the poor, I thought it was just a child's dream. I never imagined you'd come this far. Mum, I got here because you taught me the right values from the start. Everything I am today I owe to the upbringing you and Grandma gave me. Grandma Rose at 95 still blessed her grandson daily. "My dear boy, you've done exactly what God wanted you to do. You used your gifts to help those in need. Now you can rest in peace, knowing you've fulfilled your purpose." "Not yet, Grandma. There are still so many people out there who need help." And Ethan kept working. At 50, he still handled cases personally, still mentored young lawyers, still fought for the most vulnerable. His story had become legend in the American legal world. Books were written about his journey, documentaries were made about his cases, and universities created courses based on his methods. "Professor," a student asked during a lecture on the history of American law, "did Ethan Parker really start practicing law at 8? "Yes," the professor replied, "and what's most remarkable is that he maintained the same principles throughout his entire career. He never became corrupt, never abandoned his social calling, never lost his humility." How is it possible for someone to stay so consistent for so long? Because Ethan never had personal ambitions. Since childhood, his only goal was to help people in need of justice. When someone has a purpose greater than themselves, they can remain consistent throughout their life. At 55, Ethan decided to gradually reduce his activities to dedicate more time to training new social justice attorneys. He founded the Ethan Parker Institute for Social Advocacy, where young professionals received free training in social law and were prepared to work with vulnerable populations. "My goal," Ethan would explain, "isn't to train lawyers to make money, but to transform society through the law." The Institute graduated 100 new social justice attorneys each year. In 5 years, 500 professionals trained by the Institute were spread across the country, all committed to the principles Ethan taught. "Attorney Parker," said Carla, now the Institute's director, "your students are replicating. Your model in dozens of cities. You've created a national movement." "Carla, the movement isn't me. It's all these people who chose to dedicate their careers to pursuing justice. I just showed them it was possible." At 60, Ethan received the highest recognition of his career, the National Human Rights Award, presented by the President of the United States. "Ethan Parker," the President said at the ceremony, "is a living example of how knowledge can be used to transform society. His journey inspires all Americans." Ethan, moved, responded, "Mr. President, this award isn't mine. It belongs to all the people who trusted me to defend their rights, to all the colleagues who joined this cause, and especially to my family, who always supported me." Sarah, present at the ceremony, cried with emotion, "My son, your father would be so proud if he were here today. Mom, I'm sure he is proud wherever he is." Grandma Rose, now a centenarian, still gave her blessing to her grandson. "My dear boy, you've become everything I always knew you would be, a good man who uses his talents to help others." At 65, Ethan decided it was time to officially retire from active practice. He would continue as a mentor and advisor, but would pass the torch to the new generation. "Attorney Henry," Ethan said, "it's time for you all to take over. I've done my part. Ethan, you've transformed American law. Your influence will last for generations. Attorney Henry, I hope my influence inspires people never to forget that the law exists to serve the most vulnerable." At his retirement ceremony, hundreds of people Ethan had helped over his career were present. Mrs. Wilson, now a 90-year-old woman, made sure to attend. "Dear Ethan," she said, emotional, "you saved my life that day at the bank. I've never forgotten." Marina, now a lawyer inspired by Ethan's example, was also there. "Ethan, you saved me when I was a teenager, and then inspired me to follow this career. Now I'll carry on your work." John Peter, the boy who once lived on the streets and was helped by Ethan, had become a social worker. "Attorney Parker, you gave me a second chance in life. Now I dedicate my career to helping other kids like I once was." Ethan listened to all the testimonials with tears in his eyes. His life had been meaningful. He had kept the promise he made at 8 years old, to use his knowledge to help those in need. "Everyone," Ethan said in his farewell speech, "I'm the one who thanks all of you. You allowed me to live a purposeful life. You gave me the chance to make a difference." Keep fighting for your rights. Keep demanding justice. Keep believing it's possible to change society through the law. And remember, justice isn't a privilege for those with money. It's the right of every American. The speech received a 15-minute standing ovation. There wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium. Ethan retired knowing he had transformed not just individual lives, but an entire system. American law had become more social, more ethical, and more committed to justice because of his influence. Sarah, now 80 years old, summed up her son's journey. Ethan, you became exactly what you said you'd be when you were 8 years old, a lawyer who helps those in need, and you did it without ever losing your humility. Mom, I just stayed true to the values you taught me. Everything I achieved I owe to the upbringing I had at home. Grandma Rose, now 102, gave her final blessing. My dear grandson, you can rest in peace. You fulfilled your mission on earth perfectly. Ethan smiled, knowing he had indeed fulfilled his purpose. The 8-year-old boy who had once surprised a judge in court had become the most respected attorney in the country, not for his exceptional intelligence, but for his determination to use that intelligence to do good. His story became an example for future generations that talent without purpose is empty, but talent directed toward helping others can transform not just individual lives, but an entire society. And so Ethan Parker, the prodigy who became the people's lawyer, left a legacy that transcended his own life, proof that one person, no matter how young, can make a difference in the world when they have the courage to fight for what's right. The end of the story, and you? What did you think of Ethan's incredible journey? Tell us in the comments which moment touched your heart the most, and if you know someone who, like Ethan, uses their talents to help others. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one.